Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel so far back in time that the very concept of history hasn't even been invented yet. We're going to a world lit only by the sun and the stars, a world of deep, untamed quiet, to answer a question that is so fundamental we rarely even think to ask it: where did color come from? Not the color of a leaf or a sunset, but the colors that people make. Imagine a world without a single painted wall, a single dyed shirt, a single colored anything that wasn't put there by nature. Now, imagine you are the first person to change that. That's where we're going. But a small heads up, your life expectancy in this world is, let's be generous, about 30 years old. You'll be dodging saber-toothed cats and trying to figure out which berries won't kill you. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. A simple infection from a splinter could be the end of you, but here you'll be, obsessing over the perfect shade of red. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always fun to see where everyone is tuning in from, so feel free to post your city and what time it is for you in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is a canvas of muted tones. The vast, endless green of the forest, the flat brown of the plains, the bone gray of the rock shelter that is your home. Color exists, of course, in the shocking blue of a kingfisher's wing, the fleeting blush of a sunset, the gold of a lion's eye just before it decides you look like a decent meal. But these are colors you can't hold. They are momentary, wild, and belong to the world, not to you. Your own existence is largely colorless. Your clothes are the hides of animals, faded to shades of beige and gray. Your tools are stone and wood. Your life is etched in monochrome. You are walking, your bare feet calloused and sure on the familiar path. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. You're not thinking about art, or color, or legacy. You're thinking about the rumble in your stomach, the track of a deer you saw yesterday, the storm clouds gathering in the west. Your focus is survival, a constant, low-level hum of awareness. But then, something catches your eye. A stone, half buried in the dirt. It isn't the usual gray or brown. It's a deep, rich, startling red. The color of blood, but solid and permanent. Curiosity, that most human of impulses, takes over. You crouch, digging the stone out of the soil with your fingers. It's heavy, earthy. You rub your thumb across its surface, and a fine, rust-colored powder comes away on your skin. You stare at your thumb, now brilliantly stained. This is new. Wood splinters. Stone chips. But this gives its color away. It shares its essence. It's a secret the earth has just whispered to you. You look from your red-stained thumb to the smooth, pale gray wall of a nearby rock outcropping. An idea, less a thought and more a primal urge, sparks in your mind. You press your thumb against the stone. It leaves a faint, dusty print. Not enough. You go back to the red rock, finding another, harder stone to grind it with. You put a little of the powder into the palm of your other hand, mix it with a bit of spit, and work it into a thick, gritty paste. It feels like mud, but it's the color of life itself. This time, when you press your whole hand, coated in this vibrant slurry, against the pale rock face, the result is breathtaking. A perfect, sharp silhouette of your hand, in stark, impossible red. It shouts into the silence. It says, "I was here." It is not a picture of a hand, it is the mark of your hand. For the first time, you have taken a piece of the world and made it speak your language. What you've found is ochre, a pigment that will define the art of humanity for the next 100,000 years. It's essentially a type of clay rich in ferric oxide, a fancy term for what is, in essence, rust. That's your first art supply. Rust. You, the groundbreaking artist, are basically a connoisseur of sophisticated dirt. It's a humbling beginning, but every great journey starts with a single step, and yours starts with getting your hands dirty. This discovery changes things. You start to see the world differently, not just as a place of resources, food, water, shelter, but as a place of ingredients. You begin to notice other colored earths. A bright, sunny yellow ochre over here. A deep, chocolatey brown umber over there. You learn that heating the yellow ochre in a fire can transform it, darkening it into a rich, fiery red. You are the world's first chemist, and your lab is a campfire. Of course, historians still argue whether the earliest use of ochre was purely for art. Maybe it had a more practical purpose. Smeared on the skin, it could have been a primitive sunscreen against the harsh sun of the plains. Some research suggests its iron content could have acted as an insect repellent, saving you from a prehistoric version of mosquito-geddon. It might have even been used in the process of curing animal hides to make them more pliable. The line between art and survival is, for you, non-existent. A beautiful tool that works well is better than a plain one. A decorated body might ward off evil spirits or attract a mate. Color isn't a luxury, it's a form of power. Deep in a place called Blombo's Cave, in what will one day be South Africa, your distant cousins are already taking this to an incredible level. Archaeologists centuries from now will uncover what is essentially a 100,000-year-old artist's studio. They'll find abalone shells, still stained red, used as mixing pots. They'll find quartzite grinding slabs, hammerstones, and delicate bone spatulas used to mix and apply the ochre paint. This isn't a happy accident. This is a full-blown production process. It's a testament to the fact that the desire to create, to make our mark, is one of the oldest and most deeply ingrained parts of being human. You carry your precious lumps of ochre back to your shelter, perhaps wrapped in a leaf or a piece of hide. You are a little richer now, not with food, but with potential. You can mark your tools, decorate your body, and maybe, just maybe, make that pale gray rock wall into something more than just a wall. You have the color of the earth in your hands, and you're about to begin the story of art. That red handprint on the gray stone is a focal point, a declaration. But it feels flat. It's a shape, a ghost of your presence. It needs something more. Your fire, which you have so carefully tended, crackles nearby. It is the heart of your small camp, the source of warmth, of cooked food, and of safety from the things that prowl in the darkness. You look from the red hand to the licking flames, and then to the pile of wood beside it. One of the sticks has rolled away from the main fire and lies smoldering on the dirt. Its end is no longer wood. It's a deep, velvet blackness, fragile and absolute. You've seen this 1,000 times. Every morning, the remains of the previous night's fire are a mess of gray ash and black chunks of wood. It was just debris. But now, with the ochre's lesson fresh in your mind, the lesson that the earth holds color you can use, you see this burnt stick with new eyes. You pick it up carefully. It's still warm. The blackened end is crumbly, delicate. You think of your red-stained thumb and wonder. You turn back to the rock wall, a few feet away from your ochre handprint. You touch the black tip of the stick to the stone. A line appears. A pure, rich, black line. It's darker than any shadow. It's the color of a starless, moonless night, the color of the deep places in the cave behind you. It's incredible. The ochre was a powder you had to work into a paste. This is a tool, ready-made. A drawing stick. You, my friend, have just invented the charcoal pencil. Your art supply store is literally just the ground. You start to draw. Your first attempts are clumsy. You tried to capture the shape of one of the great, hairy mammoths you saw migrating across the plains last season. It looks less like a majestic beast and more like a hairy potato with legs. But it doesn't matter. It's your hairy potato. You can give it form, shape, and outline. You can use this new blackness to trace the edges of things, to give them a weight and reality that the simple stain of ochre couldn't achieve on its own. You go back to your red handprint and carefully, tentatively, draw a black line around it. The red suddenly seems brighter, the hand more defined. It leaps from the rock. Red is the flesh, the life. Black is the shadow, the outline, the boundary between the thing and the world. You quickly learn that not all charcoal is the same. The sticks from the hard, dense oak tree make for a brittle, light gray mark. But the charcoal from a pine branch, rich with its flammable sap, creates a greasy, deep black that smears beautifully with your finger. This is the birth of shading. You learn you can create soft, smoky grays, suggesting fur or distance, or the haze of a summer morning. You've just gone from 2D to 3D, or at least, a prehistoric version of 2.5D. Now you have the Earth's red and the fire's black. You have life and you have shadow. But you need light. You need the opposite of your new black. You need white. This search is more intuitive. You're already looking for colored rocks. On a foray down by a dry riverbed, kicking through the pale, dusty stones, you find it. A piece of rock so soft it feels almost chalky. You scrape it with a fingernail, and a fine white powder coats your skin. It's limestone, or chalk, or perhaps diatomaceous earth, the fossilized remains of tiny aquatic organisms from a long-vanished sea. To you, it's just a soft, white stone. You take it back to your rock wall, the site of your ever-expanding masterpiece. With the white chalk, you can add highlights. A glint in the eye of your potato mammoth. The brilliant white of its tusk. You can draw stars in a black sky, or the white caps on a churning river. You can even mix the white powder with your ochre to create a lighter, pinkish red, or with charcoal dust to create a whole new family of grays. You now have a complete tonal range: white for the highlights, ochre for the midtones of life and earth, and black for the shadows and outlines. This simple, three-color palette will be the foundation of art for millennia. Archaeologists and art historians still argue whether the use of black was purely for outlines and shadows, or if it carried a deeper symbolic weight representing night, death, or the unknown. Was it merely a practical tool for definition, or did drawing a black line around an animal serve a ritualistic purpose, an attempt to contain its spirit on the rock? For you, the distinction is meaningless. The black line does contain the spirit of the beast, because it gives it a form you can see and understand. The practical and the magical are one and the same. As you become more sophisticated in your work, you discover more potent sources of black. Here's a quirky little tidbit for you. One of the best, deepest blacks available in the ancient world was something called bone black. It was made by taking animal bones, which are full of carbon, and heating them in a sealed pot with very little oxygen. It's a process called calcination. What you get is an ash, but almost pure carbon in a very fine, dense form. The result is a black pigment that's far richer and more permanent than simple wood charcoal. So yes, you might be grinding up the bones of the deer you ate last week to paint a picture of it. It sounds a little grim, but it's the circle of life, expressed in pigment. You're also creating stains that will be the bane of anyone who ever tries to wash their clothes. You've just invented laundry day's greatest enemy. A well-known historical fact is that the charcoal used in the famous drawings at Chauvet Cave in France, some of the oldest and most spectacular cave paintings known, has been carbon dated to around 30,000 years ago. The artists there were using charcoal from Scots pine, showing a clear preference for a specific type of wood that gave them the artistic properties they wanted. They weren't just grabbing any old burnt stick. They were masters of their craft, with a deep knowledge of their materials. You now stand back and look at your work. You have the red of life, the black of night, the white of bone. You have created a scene that tells a story. It's a massive leap from that first, simple handprint. You've moved from, "I am here," to, "This is what I have seen." You are no longer just an inhabitant of the world. You are its interpreter. And you've done it all with three simple ingredients: a rusty rock, a burnt stick, and a soft white stone. Your creative journey is just beginning, and soon, you will take these colors from the open rock face into the deep, dark, secret places of the earth. Your outdoor rock canvas is a good start, but it's vulnerable. The sun beats down on it, fading your precious ochre. The rain washes away the soft chalk and blurs the edges of your charcoal lines. Your magnificent hairy potato mammoth is slowly melting back into the gray stone. It's frustrating. You've captured something powerful, and the world seems determined to scrub it away. There must be a better place, a more permanent gallery for your work. A place protected from the elements. Your gaze turns to the dark maw of the cave that provides you shelter at night. You've never gone deep inside. Why would you? It's cold, it's damp, and who knows what might be living in there. It's a place of deep, intimidating silence. But it's also a place where the rain and sun can't reach. the idea begins to form, a mix of practicality and a dawning sense of the sacred. What if you took the colors, the images of the world, and brought them into the earth itself? One day, you gather your courage and your supplies. You have your lumps of ochre, your collection of charcoal sticks, your soft white stones. You also need light. You create a simple lamp, perhaps a hollowed-out stone filled with animal fat, maybe bear grease or tallow, with a wick made from a twist of moss or juniper bark. It's a sputtering, smoky light, casting long, dancing shadows, but it's enough to push back the oppressive dark. You take a breath, the air from the cave's mouth cool and ancient on your face, and you step inside. The further you go, the more the sounds of the outside world fade away, replaced by a profound quiet. The only sounds are your own soft footsteps, the drip 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 of water seeping through stone, and the gentle hiss of your grease lamp. The air grows heavy and still. This isn't just a physical journey into rock, it's a journey into a different state of being. The dancing light of your lamp makes the rock walls seem to move and breathe. Strange formations of stalactites and stalagmites look like spirits frozen in place. The cave is alive. You find a good spot, a smooth, pale limestone wall in a chamber deep within the earth. It feels right. It's a cathedral built by geology, and you are here to decorate its nave. Here your art will be safe. It will last. But painting in a cave presents a new set of challenges. The walls are not flat. They bulge and curve and ripple. You soon realize this isn't a bug, it's a feature. You're not just painting on a surface, you're collaborating with it. You see a natural bulge in the rock. It already has the heft, the roundness of a bison's powerful shoulder. You use your charcoal to trace its outline, letting the rock's own shape provide the three-dimensional form. A crack in the stone becomes the animal's leg. A small, concave dip becomes its eye. You are not imposing an image onto the wall. You are helping an image that is already there emerge from the stone. This is a level of artistry that makes your outdoor rock face look like a child's doodle. You are working with the spirit of the cave. To apply your colors, you need more than just your fingers. You are an artist, and you need your tools. You chew the end of a stick until its fibers separate, creating a crude but effective brush. You use pads of moss or fur to dab on large areas of color, creating soft, textured hides for your beasts. And for those fine, sharp lines, you develop a new technique. You put the powdered ochre or charcoal into your mouth, mix it with saliva into a thin, liquid paint, and then, using a hollow bird bone or a reed like a primitive straw, you blow the pigment onto the wall. This is the world's first airbrush. It allows you to create beautiful, soft-edged stencils of your hands, like your first one, but now ethereal and ghostly, and to shade and blend your colors in ways you couldn't before. Your mouth is your paint sprayer, and yes, you're probably swallowing a fair bit of raw pigment. It's a good thing that iron-rich ochre is relatively non-toxic, but this is definitely not a technique you'll see endorsed by modern health and safety officials. Historians and anthropologists still argue whether these deep cave paintings were simply art for art's sake, or if they served a more complex, ritualistic function. Were they part of shamanic rites? Did a hunt leader paint a successful hunt to come, a kind of visual magic to ensure a good outcome? Or were they telling the stories of hunts already past? Were they clan markers, or astronomical charts, or teaching tools for young hunters? The truth is, we will never fully know. The people who made them left no written record, only these breathtaking images in the deep, silent dark. For you, maybe it's all of these things at once. You are painting the bison to honor its spirit, to teach your children what it looks like, and to magically call more of them into your hunting grounds. Here's a quirky fact. Some of the most famous caves, like Lascaux in France, are not just a few paintings near the entrance. The art is located deep inside, in chambers and passages that are incredibly difficult to access. To get to some of these galleries, you would have had to crawl on your stomach through tight squeezes and climb down rickety wooden structures that have long since rotted away. This wasn't a casual afternoon of painting. This was a pilgrimage. It was deliberate, difficult, and dangerous. The act of getting to the canvas was as much a part of the ritual as the painting itself. One of the most powerful mainstream historical facts about cave art is its sheer longevity and consistency. The style of the animals painted in Chauvet Cave, around 30,000 BC, is remarkably similar to those at Lascaux, around 17,000 BC, and Altamira in Spain, around 15,000 BC. For tens of thousands of years, across a vast continent, artists were using the same materials, ochres, charcoal, chalk, and the same techniques to depict the same subjects, the great animals of the Ice Age like bison, horses, aurochs, and mammoths. It represents the longest, most stable artistic tradition in human history. You hold up your flickering lamp, the soft light illuminating your work. A great bull, its shoulder formed by the living rock, seems to stamp its foot in the torchlight. A herd of horses, their legs a blur of charcoal lines, gallops across the stone ceiling. You have done more than just decorate a cave. You have created a sacred space. A parallel world, hidden within the earth, populated by the spirits of the animals you depend on. Down here, in the eternal quiet, protected from the wind and the rain, your art will survive. It will outlast you, your children, and your children's children. It will wait in the dark, a silent testament to your vision, waiting for other eyes to find it, 30,000 years in the future. You blink, and thousands of years flash by. The great ice sheets have retreated, the mammoths are gone, and your simple life of hunting and gathering has been replaced by something new. You are no longer a nomad following the herds. You are a farmer, a builder, a citizen of a great civilization rising from the fertile mud of the Nile River. You are in ancient Egypt. The world is still full of the earthy reds, blacks, and whites you knew before, but society is now more complex, more stratified, and hungry for something more. It is hungry for new colors, and especially for a vibrant, enduring blue. Blue is the color of the sky on a cloudless day, the color of the life-giving Nile itself. It's the color of divinity, of the heavens. But it is maddeningly difficult to create. There are no common blue rocks to grind up, no blue clays you can just scoop out of the ground. The few blue things that exist, the petals of a cornflower, the flash of a bird's wing, are fleeting. Their color cannot be captured and made permanent. To the Egyptians, a people obsessed with eternity and the afterlife, a fugitive color is no color at all. They need a blue that will last forever, a blue fit for a pharaoh's tomb. So, in the ultimate act of, if you can't find it, make it. You invent it. This isn't the discovery of a new pigment, it is the creation of one. You are about to become the world's first synthetic chemist, and your invention will be so revolutionary that its recipe will be used for over 3,000 years. The pigment is known today as Egyptian blue. The process is not simple. It's a precise, high-tech operation for its time. You start with a few key ingredients. First, you need sand. Not just any sand, but clean, high-quality quartz sand, which is a source of silica. Second, you need a source of copper. This could be from a copper-bearing mineral like malachite, which we'll meet again later, or from bronze filings and scraps. Bronze, being an alloy of copper and tin, works particularly well. Third, you need a source of calcium, which you get from limestone, the same soft white rock your ancestors used for white pigment. Finally, you need a flux, an alkali like natron, a naturally occurring salt harvested from the dry lake beds of Egypt. Natron is the same stuff used to dry out bodies during the mummification process, so you've always got some handy. It's the Swiss Army knife of Egyptian chemicals. You take these ingredients, sand, copper, lime, and natron, and you grind them into a fine powder. The proportions have to be just right. Too little copper, and the blue will be pale and weak. Too much, and you'll just get a glassy black mess. You mix the powder thoroughly and then you face the biggest challenge: heat. This isn't a task for your average cooking fire. You need to heat this mixture to a scorching 800 to 900 degrees Celsius. That's about 1,500 to 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit. This requires a sophisticated, purpose-built furnace, one where you can carefully control the temperature and, just as importantly, the amount of oxygen. You place the mixture in a clay pot and slide it into the roaring furnace. For hours, you tend the fire, keeping the temperature steady. Inside the pot, a quiet miracle is happening. The heat melts the ingredients together, and the copper atoms rearrange themselves within the new, glassy structure. The silica, lime, and copper fuse to create a new crystalline compound, calcium copper silicate. This is the chemical heart of Egyptian blue. When it cools, you break open the pot. What comes out is not a powder, but a rough, glassy, deep blue cake. It's hard, like stone. You haven't made paint yet. You've made the raw material. Now you have to carefully grind this blue vitreous cake back down into a powder. The size of the particles you grind it to is critical. If you grind it too finely, the color becomes pale and washed out. If the particles are too coarse, the paint will be gritty and difficult to apply. So you grind and sift, until you have a shimmering powder of the most brilliant, luminous blue you have ever seen. It's not the deep, dark blue of the night sky, but the bright, vibrant blue of the midday heavens. It is stable. It is permanent. It will not fade in the sun. You have bottled the sky. This invention, a true mainstream historical fact, is considered the world's first ever synthetic pigment, dating back to as early as 3200 BC. Its use was widespread throughout Egypt, from decorating the walls of tombs and temples to being used as an inlay in jewelry and statues. It was so successful that it was exported all over the Mediterranean, to Greece, Rome, and Mesopotamia. It was the color of choice for depicting gods and royalty. A quirky side effect of Egyptian blue's composition is that it has a very unusual property. Under infrared light, it fluoresces. It glows. This means that even on artifacts where the blue color has faded to be invisible to the naked eye, scientists can use infrared imaging to see exactly where the pigment was originally applied. They can see the glowing ghosts of ancient patterns, revealing details long lost to time. It's a little bit of accidental ancient magic that helps modern researchers. But scholars still argue whether the discovery was a happy accident or the result of deliberate experimentation. One theory suggests it might have been an offshoot of early ceramic glazing technology, known as faience. Egyptian faience was a non-clay ceramic, a paste of quartz and alkali that could be fired to create bright blue-green beads and amulets. It's possible that while trying to perfect faience, some artisans stumbled upon the specific recipe and heating conditions that produced this unique, crystalline blue pigment. Was it a mistake in a faience workshop that turned out to be a brilliant breakthrough? Or did some ancient genius systematically test different combinations of materials until they achieved their goal? We may never know for sure. You, however, are just proud of your creation. You have taken sand, stone, and metal and through the alchemy of fire, transformed them into a color of divine importance. You can now paint the skin of the god Ammonius. You can depict the sacred scarab beetle. You can adorn the sarcophagus of your pharaoh with a color that promises an eternal afterlife under a perpetually clear blue sky. You are no longer just using the colors you can find, you are making the colors you can imagine. This leap, from finding to making, is as significant as the leap from that first ochre handprint to the art-filled caves. And it opens up a whole new world of colorful possibilities, even as it creates a new hierarchy of color, where this difficult, man-made blue is far more valuable than the simple, common red of the earth. Your synthetic Egyptian blue is a triumph of ingenuity, a brilliant and reliable color that brings the sky down to earth. But it's a craftsman's color. It's manufactured. For all its utility, there's another blue, a blue that comes not from a furnace but from the deep, secret heart of the mountains. This blue is not made, it is found. And its rarity, its depth, and the perilous journey required to obtain it make it the most revered and precious color in the ancient world. This is the divine blue, the celestial stone, lapis lazuli. You are no longer an Egyptian artisan standing by a kiln. You are a trader, a traveler on the Silk Road, or perhaps one of the hardy miners who ventures into the forbidding, snow-capped peaks of a place that will one day be called Afghanistan. Your quest is for a single, specific type of rock, found in only one major location in the entire ancient world, the Sarisang mines, nestled in the remote Koksha River valley of Badakhshan province. For thousands of years, this was virtually the only source of high-quality lapis lazuli on the planet. The journey itself is a trial. You trudge through arid deserts, navigate treacherous mountain passes, and negotiate with hostile tribes, all for this fabled blue stone. The air is thin, the work is brutal. You are chipping away at hard marble deposits, searching for the vibrant blue veins that run through them. When you finally strike a rich seam, it feels like you've found a piece of the night sky fallen to earth. The stone is a deep, intense, ultramarine blue, flecked with golden flecks of pyrite. It's not just a color, it's a microcosm of the heavens, with the deep blue of twilight and the gold of distant stars. Unlike your Egyptian blue, which was ground from a uniform, glassy cake, lapis lazuli is a rock, a complex mixture of minerals. The blue color comes from a component called lazurite. But it also contains calcite, which appears as white streaks, and pyrite, the fool's gold, that gives it its signature golden flecks. Getting a pure blue pigment from this stone is a painstaking process. First, the rough stones have to be carried all the way back from the mountains to the workshops of Mesopotamia, Egypt, or later, Rome. There, a craftsman, perhaps you, begins the delicate task of purification. If you were to simply grind the whole rock into a powder, the calcite and other minerals would dilute the lazurite, resulting in a dull, grayish-blue dust. That would be a tragic waste of such a precious material. This is why for a long time, lapis was used more for jewelry and inlay than as a pigment. The famous golden death mask of Tutankhamun, for example, features stripes of solid lapis lazuli, not lapis-based paint. But eventually, a clever, if slightly bizarre, purification method was developed, likely first perfected in the Middle Ages but with roots in much earlier practices. This is a bit of historical alchemy that feels like it shouldn't work. You take the ground-up lapis powder and mix it into a doughy ball with melted beeswax, pine resin, and plant-based oils. It's like you're making a lump of blue Play-Doh. You need this sticky, blue-gray mass for hours, even days. It's a process that is both art and science, and a great way to ruin a perfectly good afternoon. Then, you submerge this resinous ball in a bath of lye, a weak alkaline solution. As you continue to knead the ball under the liquid, something amazing happens. The fine particles of blue lazurite, being the smallest and heaviest, slowly wash out of the dough and sink to the bottom of the bath. The larger, lighter particles of calcite and other impurities remain trapped in the sticky resin. You carefully pour off the lye, collect the fine blue sediment at the bottom, and repeat the process. Each washing yields a slightly different grade of pigment. The first wash gives you the most brilliant, pure, and expensive ultramarine. Subsequent washes produce paler, less vibrant, but still useful, shades of blue. The resulting pigment is called ultramarine, a name which literally means from beyond the sea, a nod to its exotic, distant origins. This pigment was, ounce for ounce, more valuable than gold. It was reserved for the most sacred and important uses. In Egypt, it was used for the eyes of divine statues and to paint the beards of the gods. In medieval Europe, the Virgin Mary's robes were almost exclusively painted in ultramarine, a testament to its supreme status. A patron commissioning a painting would often have to supply the costly pigment to the artists themselves. Its use was a direct and unambiguous statement of wealth and piety. A quirky but important detail about ultramarine is its stability. It is completely unaffected by light and time. A blue painted with ultramarine 1,000 years ago is, under the right conditions, just as vibrant today. However, it does have one enemy: acids. Even a mild acid can cause ultramarine sickness, a chemical reaction that bleaches the color to a grayish yellow. This is why you see discolored patches in some old Renaissance paintings where acidic air pollution or improper varnish has damaged the precious blue. Historians still debate whether the ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians ever successfully used the complex resin dough extraction method to create a high-grade ultramarine pigment for painting. The evidence is scant. While they were masters of using the solid stone, the widespread use of true, purified ultramarine paint seems to become more common much later. Early, lapis paint may have just been the less effective ground-up version, resulting in that duller, gray-blue. It's possible the true secret of purification was discovered and lost several times before being perfected. It highlights a recurring theme in ancient technology. Just because a civilization had a material doesn't mean they had unlocked all of its potential uses. For you, the miner or the trader, the stone represents not just color, but survival and wealth. The long, dangerous journey is worth it because you know that back in the grand cities, kings and high priests are waiting. They crave this specific shade of blue, not the one from the furnace, but the one from the soul of the mountain. It holds a power and a mystique that a man-made color, no matter how brilliant, can never quite replicate. Egyptian blue might be the color of the sky, but ultramarine, from lapis lazuli, is the color of the heavens. It's a subtle but crucial distinction, and it's what made people cross the known world for a handful of blue rocks. After the celestial blues, you turn your attention to a color that is far more terrestrial, more visceral. Red. It's the color of your own blood, of fire, of ripe fruit, and of the setting sun. It signifies life, passion, danger, and power. Unlike the elusive blues, red is a color you've known since your earliest days as an artist. Remember that first ochre handprint? You were already a master of red. But now, in a more complex world, you discover that red is not just one color, but a whole family of hues, sourced from the earth, from plants, and even from the bodies of tiny insects. Your most basic and reliable red is still the one you started with, red ochre. Iron oxide. It's cheap, it's abundant, and it's incredibly permanent. All around the Mediterranean, from the villas of Pompeii to the temples of Egypt, walls are slathered in shades of ochre red. It's the workhorse of the ancient painter's palette. You can dig it out of the ground in shades from brownish red to a brighter, more orange red. You've learned that by roasting yellow ochre, you can deepen its color, creating fiery shades that artists call burnt ochre. A famous example is the rich, warm red that dominates the murals in Pompeii and Herculaneum, often referred to as Pompeian red. It's a color that feels both earthy and sophisticated. But sometimes you need a brighter, truer red than the earthy tones of ochre can provide. For this, you turn to another mineral, cinnabar. When you first find it, it looks like a dark red, almost crystalline rock, often found in areas of volcanic activity. But when you grind it down, it produces a powder of an astonishingly brilliant vermilion red. It's a showstopper. This is the red you use when you really want to make a statement. Roman generals, during their triumphal parades, would have their faces painted with this vibrant red, making them look like living statues of the god Jupiter. However, cinnabar has a dark secret. It is mercury sulfide. It's incredibly toxic. The process of mining and grinding it was often a death sentence. The mines in Almaden, Spain, were notorious. They were staffed by criminals and slaves who were sent there to die, their bodies slowly poisoned by the mercury they were extracting. When you, as an artist, grind the pigment, you have to be careful not to inhale the dust. If you use it in a mural, it has another unfortunate property. It can darken when exposed to light, turning from a brilliant red to a dull black over time. Historians still argue whether the darkening of cinnabar on some ancient murals is due to a chemical transformation of the mercury sulfide itself, or the growth of black, light-loving bacteria on its surface. Either way, your brilliant red is a gamble. It offers unparalleled vibrancy at a terrible price, both to your health and to the longevity of your art. Disappointed by the toxic and unstable nature of mineral reds, you might turn to the plant kingdom. The roots of the madder plant, Rubia tinctorum, are a fantastic source for a beautiful rose-red dye. You dig up the long, tangled roots, dry them, and then grind them into a powder. To use this as a paint, you need to precipitate the dye onto an inert, colorless base, like powdered chalk or alum. This creates what's called a lake pigment. The process is a bit like the mordanting we'll discuss for fabrics later. You're essentially staining a white powder to create a new, solid pigment. Madder Lake produces a lovely, translucent red that is less opaque than the ochres and less garish than cinnabar. It's perfect for creating delicate rosy cheeks on a portrait, or for glazing over other colors to add depth and warmth. Its use has been identified on Egyptian mummy portraits from the Roman era, a testament to its popularity and beauty. But the undisputed king of ancient red dyes, the most sought after and expensive red of them all, comes from a much smaller and more unlikely source. It comes from an insect. Specifically, the dried and crushed bodies of a tiny scale insect called the Kermes vermilia. These little insects live on the branches of a specific type of oak tree found throughout the Mediterranean region. For most of the year, they look like nothing more than tiny, berry-like bumps on the bark. In fact, for centuries, people thought they were a kind of berry or seed, referring to the dye as Kermes grain. As a Kermes harvester, your job is to go out in late spring and carefully scrape these tiny female insects off the oak twigs. It's incredibly painstaking work. The insects are harvested just before they lay their eggs, as this is when they are fullest of the precious red dye. You need thousands upon thousands of these tiny bodies to produce even a small amount of dye. The main coloring agent is kermesic acid. To extract it, the insects are dried and then crushed. The resulting powder is then boiled in water to release the brilliant crimson color. This crimson dye was spectacularly vibrant, light-fast, and incredibly expensive due to the labor involved. It was the color of luxury and power. High-ranking Roman officials wore robes dyed with kermes. The scarlet, mentioned in the Bible, is almost certainly referring to this insect dye. It was the color that signaled wealth and status in a way that common ochre never could. It became the signature color for the robes of cardinals in the Catholic Church, a tradition that continued for centuries. Here's a quirky tidbit: the words crimson and vermilion actually come from this insect. The Latin word for the insect was vermiculus, meaning little worm. This became vermilion in French, which we now associate with the mineral pigment cinnabar. The Arabic word for the insect, kermes, gave us the Persian kermesi, which in turn gave us the English word crimson. It's a linguistic fossil, reminding us that for a very long time, the ultimate red was synonymous with a bug. This same principle of using insects for red dye was also discovered independently on the other side of the world. In the Americas, the Aztecs and other Mesoamerican cultures harvested the cochineal insect, which lives on prickly pear cacti. Cochineal produces an even more potent red dye from carminic acid and would eventually supplant kermes in Europe after the Spanish conquest. But for you, in the Old World, kermes is king. So you stand before your palette, which is now rich with reds. You have the cheap, reliable red of the earth for your backgrounds and broad strokes. You have the dangerously beautiful, but toxic and unstable, vermilion for that pop of ultimate brightness. And you have the subtle, translucent red from the madder root. But most prized of all, you have the deep, powerful crimson, painstakingly extracted from the bodies of thousands of tiny insects. Each red tells a different story, of the earth, of danger, of life, and of immense, back-breaking luxury. You've mastered the earthy reds, the divine blues, and the starkness of black and white. But there's one color so legendary, so impossibly expensive, and so wrapped in mystique that it transcends mere pigment. It's a color that signifies not just wealth or power, but absolute, imperial authority. This is the color purple. And its story doesn't begin with a rock or a plant, but with a smelly, slimy sea snail. You are now a Phoenician dyer, living in a bustling port city like Tyre or Sidon on the coast of the Levant. Your city's fame and fortune are built not on gold or spices, but on a closely guarded industrial secret, the recipe for Tyrian purple. Your hands are permanently stained, and you smell constantly of the sea and something far less pleasant, because your workshop is a combination of a fishing operation, a slaughterhouse, and a chemical lab. The source of this legendary color is a specific type of predatory sea snail, or murex. There are several species that work, primarily the Bolinus brandaris and the Hexaplex trunculus. You don't just find these snails washed up on the beach. You have to go out in boats and catch them in baited baskets, a laborious process in itself. Once you have a sufficient haul, and you'll need a staggering number of them, the real work begins. You take your snails, thousands of them, and with a small hammer, you carefully crack open their shells to access a tiny gland, the hypobranchial gland. From this gland, you extract a few drops of a clear, mucus-like liquid. It doesn't look like much. It's certainly not purple. It's milky and smells faintly of garlic. This is the raw material. The real magic happens when this fluid is exposed to sunlight and oxygen. Here's the process. You collect this mucus in a lead or tin pot, add some salt water, and let it sit in the sun for a few days. The vat slowly undergoes a stunning transformation. The liquid turns from clear to pale yellow, then to green, then to violet, and finally to a deep, reddish purple. The smell during this fermentation process is, by all historical accounts, absolutely horrendous. Ancient writers described the stench of the dyeworks as overpowering, and these facilities were usually located on the outskirts of cities for good reason. You, my friend, are practicing one of the foulest-smelling professions in the ancient world. It's a small price to pay for creating the color of emperors. To dye a piece of wool, you would dip the clean fleece into this potent, stinking brew and then pull it out into the sunlight. The color would develop right before your eyes, a miraculous shift as the photochemical reaction completed. The final shade could be controlled by the species of snail used, the duration of the sun exposure, and the additives in the vat. One species of snail produced a more reddish purple, while another produced a more bluish violet. By combining them, a master dyer like you could create a range of shades, the most prized of which was a dark, rich color described as the color of clotted blood. The reason Tyrian purple was so astronomically expensive is a simple matter of math. A well-known historical fact is that it took something like 10,000 to 12,000 murex snails to produce just 1.4 grams of pure dye, enough to color the hem of a single garment. A whole pound of wool would require tens of thousands of snails. This wasn't just dye, it was concentrated labor and marine life. As a result, only the absolute pinnacle of society could afford it. In the Roman Republic, high-ranking senators wore a toga with a purple stripe, the toga praetexta. Later, during the Roman Empire, the all-purple toga, the toga picta, was reserved exclusively for the emperor. Laws were passed, known as sumptuary laws, that explicitly forbade ordinary citizens from wearing Tyrian purple. To wear this color was to wear a symbol of the state itself. It was a statement so powerful that it bordered on treason for anyone but the emperor to do it. Now for a quirky tidbit about the chemistry. The precursor fluid in the snail's gland is not the dye itself. The complex organic molecules in the mucus have to be broken down by enzymes and then oxidized by light to form the final dye molecule, 6,4 dibromoindigo. What's fascinating is that this molecule is closely related to indigo, the blue dye we'll get to later. The only difference is the presence of 2 bromine atoms, which the snail gets from its seawater environment. These 2 little bromine atoms are what shift the color from blue to a deep purple and make it incredibly stable. Tyrian purple is what chemists call a vat dye. It's one of the most permanent natural dyes known to humanity. It doesn't fade in the sun. If anything, it gets brighter. It was said that a properly dyed robe would outlast the wearer. But scholars still argue whether the exact recipes and techniques were as monolithic as they seem. Were there cheaper, imitation purples? Absolutely. Dyers could use a technique called double dyeing, first dyeing a cloth with the cheaper blue from woad or indigo, and then topping it with a red from kermes or madder to create a purplish hue. Another method involved using lichens, specifically from the Richella genus, to create a dye called orchil. Orchil produced a beautiful purple, but it was far less permanent than the real deal. A true connoisseur, however, could always tell the difference. The genuine Tyrian purple had a subtle, multi-toned shimmer, and, according to some, a faint, lingering sea smell that the fakes just couldn't replicate. You stand by your vats, the stench a familiar part of your life. You watch a piece of wool emerge from the brew, transforming in the sun into that impossibly rich color. You are not just a dyer, you are an alchemist, a guardian of a state's secret. You are turning slimy sea creatures into a color that makes men gasp, a color that represents the absolute apex of power on Earth. Your hands might be stained and your nose might be offended, but you are weaving the very fabric of empire, one stinking snail at a time. The legacy of your work will echo through history, making purple a synonym for royalty for the next 2,000 years. Having conquered the regal purple, your quest for a complete palette turns to the color of sunshine, wealth, and caution, yellow. Like red, yellow is a color that can be sourced from the earth. Your old friend, yellow ochre, is still a reliable and cheap option, providing a range of dusty, mustard-like hues perfect for backgrounds and everyday objects. But you're an ambitious artist, and you crave a yellow that is more vibrant, more alive. A yellow that truly shines. For this, you must look beyond simple dirt and explore the worlds of delicate flowers and dangerously toxic minerals. Your first stop is in the plant kingdom, and it leads you to one of the most precious spices in the world. You are in a field at dawn, the air cool and crisp. Before you are rows upon rows of a small, delicate purple flower, the saffron crocus. The source of the vibrant yellow dye isn't the petals, but the three tiny, thread-like red-orange stigmas at the flower's heart. To harvest them, you must gently pluck each flower by hand and then, with painstaking precision, remove the three stigmas. It's an incredibly labor-intensive process, which is why saffron has always been worth more than its weight in gold. A historical fun fact: you need to harvest around 150,000 flowers to produce just 1 kilogram of dried saffron threads. To turn these threads into a color, you steep them in warm water. The threads bleed a magnificent, luminous yellow into the liquid. This dye can be used to color textiles, creating a brilliant, sunny yellow cloth that was highly prized. For a painter, you would use the same lake-making process as with madder root, precipitating the saffron dye onto a white powder like alum. The resulting pigment is beautiful but has a major drawback: it's a fugitive color. This means it fades dramatically when exposed to light. A painting with saffron yellow might look stunning on day one, but after a few years of display, the brilliant yellow would ghost into a pale, sad beige. It's the color of fleeting beauty, a painter's heartbreaker. Seeking a more permanent yellow, you might turn to other, more common plants. Weld, Reseda luteolale, also known as dyer's rocket, was the go-to plant for a strong, light-fast yellow dye for textiles in Europe for centuries. The entire upper part of the plant was used, crushed and boiled to release a chemical called luteolin, which gives a clear, bright yellow. Similarly, you could use the dried flowers of the safflower plant, not to be confused with saffron. Safflower petals contain two dyes, a weak yellow one that washes out in water, and a more potent red one. Ironically, to get the red, you first had to wash the yellow away. It's like the plant is making you work for the good stuff. But the most brilliant, most opaque, and most dangerous yellow of the ancient world doesn't come from a plant. It comes from a mineral that looks like it was mined from the fires of the underworld. You are now in a Roman or Persian workshop, handling a lump of a startlingly yellow, crystalline mineral. It's soft and has a strange, resinous luster. This is orpiment. Its name comes from the Latin ore pigmentum, meaning gold pigment, because its brilliant color was thought to resemble that of the precious metal. When ground into a powder, it produces a yellow of unmatched intensity and opacity. It's the yellow you would use to paint gold itself, or the brilliant robes of a sun god. However, orpiment is arsenic trisulfide. Yes, that arsenic. It is lethally poisonous. Simply grinding the pigment creates a toxic dust that you absolutely must not inhale or ingest. As an artist using it, you would have to be incredibly careful, washing your hands meticulously and ensuring you didn't, for example, absent-mindedly chew on the end of your paintbrush. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from our Egyptian adventures? This makes that look like a day at the spa. The Romans, who were well aware of its toxicity, used slaves and prisoners to mine it, much like they did with cinnabar. Beyond its toxicity, orpiment was also a chemically fussy diva. It was known as a hostile pigment because it reacts very poorly with certain other pigments, especially those based on lead or copper. If you painted your beautiful orpiment yellow next to a lead white highlight, the colors could react over time and turn a disgusting black or brown. An artist had to know their chemistry, keeping their poisonous yellow well away from their other poisonous pigments. It's a bit like hosting a dinner party where two of your guests might try to kill each other if they sit too close. A quirky, but telling, tidbit is found in the writings of the 15th century painter Cennino Cennini, who inherited much of his knowledge from ancient and medieval traditions. He wrote of orpiment, "This color is really poisonous. Beware of soiling your mouth with it. lest you suffer personal injury. He wasn't kidding. He also noted its incompatibility with other colors and advised artists to use a less vibrant but much safer yellow pigment made from, well, he wasn't exactly sure. This leads us to a scholarly debate. Ancient texts and artistic evidence point to the use of several different plant-based yellow lake pigments, but historians and scientists still argue about their exact recipes and prevalence. We know about saffron and wealth, but there were likely dozens of other local plants used to create yellow dyes and pigments. The problem is that these organic lake pigments are very difficult to identify with modern analytical techniques, unlike the easily identifiable mineral pigments. They often break down over time, leaving only faint traces of their organic markers. We have a good grasp of their big name, yellows, but the palate of the average local artist, who couldn't afford a lump of poison from Persia, was likely filled with a variety of yellows made from local flowers and weeds, their specific recipes now lost to time. So, you have your choices for yellow. You can have the fleeting, poetic beauty of saffron, a color as precious and temporary as life itself. You can have the reliable, workaday yellow from the weld plant, a sturdy and honest color. Or you can reach for the ultimate, brilliant yellow of orpiment, a color of stunning beauty that might poison you, ruin your painting if you mix it incorrectly, and was likely mined by people condemned to a terrible fate. The choice you make defines you as an artist. Do you prioritize beauty, safety, or permanence? In the ancient world, you rarely got all three in one pot. With yellows and blues in your repertoire, you might think that making green would be simple. Just mix them, right? A bit of your shiny, toxic orpiment with a dash of your synthetic Egyptian blue should do the trick. You try it, mixing the two powders together. The result is a sludgy, disappointing mess. The colors don't blend, they just sit next to each other as tiny, separate particles of yellow and blue. The idea of subtractive color mixing, where yellow and blue make green, is a modern concept that works with transparent inks or dyes, not with opaque mineral pigments. For you, an ancient painter, if you want green, you have to find a green pigment. And that is a surprisingly difficult task. Green is the color of life, of vegetation, of new growth and forests. It is everywhere in the natural world. But capturing that color in a stable, usable pigment is another one of antiquity's great challenges. The most obvious source, the green chlorophyll from leaves, is a non-starter. You can crush up leaves and get a lovely green stain, but it will turn a disgusting brown in a matter of hours as the chlorophyll breaks down. It's even more fugitive than saffron. You need a green that lasts. Your first and most reliable source is, once again, a mineral. You are back in the copper mines, but this time you're not looking for the metal itself, or the material for making blue. You are looking for the beautiful green patina that forms on copper deposits. This is malachite, a vibrant green copper carbonate. In its raw form, it's a stunning stone, often found with beautiful banded patterns. It's been used for thousands of years, not just as a pigment, but also for jewelry and ornamentation. The Egyptians, in particular, loved it. They carved amulets from it, and used it in their cosmetics. To turn malachite into a pigment, you follow the familiar process. You grind it into a powder. The quality of the green depends on the purity of the stone and the coarseness of the grind. A coarser grind produces a deep, rich, crystalline green, but it's difficult to paint with. Grind it too finely, and like Egyptian blue, the color becomes weak and pale. Finding the perfect consistency is a delicate art. Malachite green is a strong, opaque color, and it's relatively stable, making it the best green available for much of ancient history. It was the go-to green for any artist who could get their hands on it. But what if you couldn't find or afford malachite? You get creative. You know that copper itself seems to have a green spirit locked inside it. You've seen how bronze statues turn green over time when left out in the rain. So you decide to speed up the process. You decide to make your own green. This leads you to a family of man-made pigments known collectively as verdigris. The recipe for verdigris is a classic example of ancient corrosive chemistry. You take a sheet of copper or bronze and expose it to a weak acid. One common method was to hang the copper plate over a vat of fermenting grapes or vinegar. The acidic fumes would rise and react with the surface of the metal. Over several weeks, a crust of a beautiful, blue-green crystal would form on the copper. You would then scrape this crust off, grind it up, and you'd have your pigment. Voila, you've made your own green. It felt like a clever hack, a way to get a vibrant color without an expensive mineral. However, verdigris was a deeply problematic pigment. First, its color was notoriously unpredictable. The exact shade could vary wildly depending on the acid used, the temperature, and the humidity. You could end up with anything from a bright, turquoise-like green to a dark, almost blackish green. Second, it was chemically unstable and highly reactive. Much like its yellow cousin orpiment, verdigris was a hostile pigment. It could damage the paper or parchment it was painted on, sometimes eating right through it over time. It also reacted poorly with other pigments, especially those containing sulfur, like orpiment or cinnabar. A well-known historical fact is that many medieval manuscripts show brown, corroded halos around areas that were once painted with verdigris, a testament to its destructive nature. And third, it was a chameleon. Scholars still debate the full extent of verdigris's color-shifting properties, but it was known to change over time. It could start as a brilliant blue-green and slowly darken to a deep, earthy green or even brown. This makes studying ancient paintings incredibly difficult. Is that drab brown area what the artist intended, or was it once a vibrant field of verdigris green that has since degraded? Without scientific analysis, it's impossible to know for sure. Using verdigris was a constant gamble. Frustrated by the expense of malachite and the instability of verdigris, you might turn to a third option, green earth. This pigment, known by its French name terre verte, is a type of clay containing iron silicate minerals like glauconite and celadonite. It's essentially a greenish-colored ochre. It's soft, stable, and easy to work with. The downside? The color is very weak. It's a pale, transparent grayish-green. It's not the vibrant color of a spring leaf, but more the subtle, cool green of a dusty olive or a stormy sea. While it wasn't a showstopper, it was cheap, reliable, and played nicely with other pigments. It found a niche in underpainting. For instance, medieval and Renaissance artists would often paint the entire flesh-toned area of a portrait with a layer of green earth first. Then, they would apply the pinkish skin tones over it. The cool green underneath would make the warm pinks on top look more vibrant and lifelike, a clever trick of color theory. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. The ancient Romans had another, stranger source for green. They would sometimes dye chalk or another white pigment using the green juice from buckthorn berries. However, they had to pick the berries at just the right stage of ripeness to get a good green. Picked too late, the juice would be purplish. The resulting lake pigment was called sap green, but like most plant-based colors, it was notoriously fugitive and would fade in the light. It's yet another example of ancient artists trying everything in their power to capture the elusive color of nature, even if the results were fleeting. So, your palette for green is a study in compromise. You have the beautiful but expensive malachite, the brilliant but dangerously unstable verdigris, and the weak but steady green earth. None of them are perfect. Each one requires a deep understanding of its properties and limitations. Creating a lush, green landscape was one of the most technically demanding tasks for an ancient artist. It makes you look at the simple green on a modern color wheel with a newfound respect, knowing the millennia of frustration and experimentation it took to finally tame the color of life. You travel now across a vast ocean of time and space, leaving the old world behind. You land in the humid, tangled green of the Mesoamerican jungles. Here, civilizations like the Maya, the Aztec, and the Toltec are building towering pyramids and developing complex societies. They have their own vibrant palette, with brilliant reds from cochineal insects and yellows from native flowers. But they also possess a color that is so unique, so incredibly durable, that it would baffle scientists for centuries. This is the story of Maya blue. You are a Maya priest or a scribe, preparing to paint a mural on the wall of a temple or to illustrate a sacred codex. You need a blue that can withstand the intense sun and tropical downpours of your climate. A standard mineral pigment might wash away. A plant dye would surely fade. You need something special, something that is both brilliant and eternal. You reach for your pot of Maya blue. The color itself is breathtaking. It's not the deep, dark ultramarine of lapis, nor the bright sky blue of Egyptian blue. It's a vibrant, slightly greenish turquoise. It's the color of the sacred Quetzal bird's feathers, the color of the cenotes, the natural limestone wells that were seen as gateways to the underworld. It is a color of profound religious significance, associated with rain, water, and the life-giving god chalk. When archaeologists in the 20th century first uncovered murals and pottery decorated with this pigment at sites like Chichen Itza, they were stunned. The color was as bright and unfaded as the day it was painted, despite having endured over 1,000 years of harsh tropical conditions. They analyzed the pigment, expecting to find a new type of mineral or perhaps some complex crushed gemstone. They found neither. The composition of Maya blue was a complete mystery. This is a well-known historical fact. For much of the 20th century, the recipe for this super-durable pigment was considered one of the great lost secrets of the ancient world. You, of course, know the secret. It's a masterpiece of organic and inorganic chemistry, a true hybrid pigment unlike anything else in the ancient world. The recipe involves two key ingredients. The first is a plant, the indigo plant, Indigofera suffruticosa, a species native to the Americas. You harvest the leaves and go through a complex process of steeping and fermentation to extract the indigo dye molecules. We'll explore this process in more detail later, but for now, just know that you end up with a potent blue dye. The second ingredient is a very specific type of clay. Not just any clay, but a special white clay called palygorskite, or adipolgite. This clay is unique because, at a microscopic level, it has a crystal structure full of long, hollow channels, like a bundle of incredibly tiny straws. This gives it a huge surface area and makes it highly absorbent. It's a key component of the soil in the Yucatan Peninsula. Here's where the magic happens. You take your indigo dye and you mix it with the white palygorskite clay. But you don't just mix it. You have to heat the mixture, though not to the scorching temperatures needed for Egyptian blue. You gently heat it to around 150 to 200 degrees Celsius, about 300 to 400 Fahrenheit. As you heat the slurry, the indigo dye molecules physically enter the microscopic channels of the clay. They become trapped, not just coating the outside of the clay particles, but becoming an integral part of their very structure. The heat forges a powerful chemical bond between the organic dye and the inorganic clay. The result is a new, composite pigment. The indigo provides the brilliant color, and the palygorskite clay acts as an invincible suit of armor. It protects the fragile organic dye molecules from the sun's UV rays, from water, from acid rain, and even from modern chemical solvents. You have created a pigment that is, for all practical purposes, indestructible. It's an elegant and ingenious piece of nanotechnology, invented by ancient priests and artisans. This pigment was used for the most sacred purposes. A particularly dramatic historical use of Maya blue was at the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza. This massive sinkhole was a major pilgrimage site. During rituals, precious objects, gold, jade, pottery, and human sacrifices were thrown into the cenote as offerings. Many of the objects recovered from the bottom of this cenote, and even the remains of the sacrificial victims themselves, were painted with a thick layer of Maya blue. It was the color of sacrifice, the sacred paint used to prepare an offering for the gods. A quirky detail that emerged from the research that finally cracked the recipe in the 1990s was the potential role of copal incense. Scientists found that to get the most durable bond between the indigo and the clay, a little bit of copal resin, a tree sap used as a ceremonial incense by the Maya, might have been added to the mixture. Scholars still argue whether the copal was a deliberate, functional ingredient, or simply an accidental inclusion due to the pigment being prepared in a ritual context where copal incense was always being burned. Was the incense smoke part of the chemical recipe, or was the pigment just being made in a smoky room? It's a fascinating question that blurs the line between ritual and chemistry. It suggests that for the Maya, the magic of the ritual and the science of the pigment's creation were one and the same. You take your brush, made from animal hair or yucca fibers, and you dip it into the thick turquoise paint. You paint the image of the rain god on the temple wall, his face a mask of brilliant blue. You paint the sacred serpent, its scales shimmering with the color of the life-giving waters. You know that this color will last. It will outlast your own life, the life of your city, and perhaps even the memory of your gods. It is a testament to your people's deep understanding of the natural world, of the way a humble plant and a special clay could be combined to create a color for eternity. The enduring mystery of Maya blue is a powerful reminder that we don't have a monopoly on clever chemistry. Sometimes the most advanced technologies are found not in a modern lab, but in the forgotten clay pots of a jungle civilization. So, you have your incredible, indestructible Maya blue powder. You have your pot of ground-up malachite, your jar of toxic orpiment, your bag of earthy red ochre. They are beautiful, concentrated essences of color. But right now, that's all they are: dust. Useless, pretty dust. If you take a pinch of that brilliant powder and rub it on a wooden panel or a piece of parchment, most of it will just brush right off. A faint stain might remain, but you can't paint a masterpiece with dust. You've solved the pigment problem, but now you face an entirely new and equally important challenge: the binder problem. A pigment is the color, but a binder is the vehicle. It's the substance that holds the pigment particles together and, crucially, makes them stick, or bind, to a surface. Think of it like this: pigment is the flour, but the binder is the water, egg, or oil that turns it from a useless powder into a functional dough. Without a binder, you don't have paint. You just have a colorful mess. Your simplest and most ancient binder is water. But water alone is only useful in one very specific, and very stressful, circumstance: true fresco painting, or buon fresco. You are a Roman artist, tasked with decorating the villa of a wealthy merchant in Pompeii. Your canvas is a freshly laid wall of wet lime plaster. You mix your pigment, let's say red ochre, with plain water, creating a thin, watery paint. Then you have to work fast. You paint directly onto the wet plaster. As the plaster dries, a chemical reaction occurs. The lime in the plaster absorbs carbon dioxide from the air and crystallizes, turning back into limestone. Your pigment particles get trapped right inside this new, crystalline surface. The color doesn't just sit on the wall, it becomes part of the wall. This is a mainstream historical fact. The technique of buon fresco created some of the most durable paintings of antiquity, from the Minoan palaces on Crete to the villas of the Roman Empire. The catch? You can only paint as much as you can finish in a single day, before the plaster dries. This section is called a giornata, or a day's work. It's like trying to paint a masterpiece on a canvas with a ticking time bomb. But what if your wall is already dry? Or what if you want to paint on a wooden panel, or a piece of papyrus? Water won't work. The water will evaporate, and the pigment will flake right off. You need something with some stickiness. You need a better binder. And for this, you turn to the kitchen. You reach for an egg. This is the basis of tempera painting. You crack an egg, carefully separating the yolk from the white. The yolk is a perfect natural emulsion, full of lecithin and oils that make it both sticky and fast-drying. You gently pierce the yolk sac and let the golden liquid run into a small pot. You add your pigment powder and a little water, and mix it into a smooth, creamy paint. You have just made egg tempera, the primary painting medium for thousands of years, used for everything from Egyptian mummy portraits to medieval icons. Working with egg tempera is a unique experience. It dries almost instantly, so you can't blend colors smoothly like you can with modern oil paints. Instead, you have to build up colors with fine, cross-hatching brushstrokes, like you're drawing with paint. But the result is incredibly durable. Once cured, egg tempera is tough, water-resistant, and has a beautiful, subtle, satin sheen. Your art supplies now consist of deadly poisons, the guts of sea snails, and your breakfast. It's a strange shopping list. Maybe egg isn't your style. Maybe you want a richer, more luminous effect. For this, you turn to another binder, beeswax. This is the encaustic technique, and it's not for the faint of heart. You take your pigment and mix it with molten beeswax, sometimes with a bit of resin added for hardness. Your paint, is now a hot, waxy paste. You have to keep it heated while you work, applying it to your surface, usually a wooden panel, with a heated metal spatula called a cestrum or with stiff brushes. You can then reheat the surface with a flaming torch or a hot iron to fuse the colors together. It's a demanding, smoky, and slightly dangerous process. You're painting with fire, but the results are breathtaking. Encaustic paint has a depth and translucency that tempera can't match. The light penetrates the waxy layers and reflects off the pigment particles, giving the painting an inner glow. The most famous examples of this are the Fayum mummy portraits from Roman-era Egypt. These are startlingly lifelike portraits painted on wooden boards that were placed over the face of the deceased. When you look at one, you are looking at a face rendered in a medium of hot wax, a face that seems to be alive, looking back at you across 2,000 years. For a quirky tidbit, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder describes a special recipe for Punic wax, a purified beeswax binder. The process involved boiling the wax in seawater 3 times and then leaving it in the sun, supposedly making it whiter, harder, and more suitable for painting. Historians and art scientists still argue about the exact binder recipes used in many ancient artworks. Was it pure egg yolk, or did they use the whole egg? Did they add a little oil to their tempera to make it more flexible, creating a tempera grassa? Did they have other secret ingredients now lost to time? Binders are organic, and they break down over centuries, making them much harder to analyze and identify than the inorganic mineral pigments. The binder is the ghost in the machine of ancient paint. Finally, what if you're a scribe in an Egyptian temple, illustrating a scroll of the Book of the Dead on papyrus? Egg tempera and wax are too thick and brittle. When you roll up the scroll, they would crack and flake off. For this, you need a binder that is light and flexible. You need gum. Specifically, gum arabic, the hardened sap of the acacia tree. You collect the little amber-colored tears of sap, dissolve them in water, and mix in your pigment, often a fine soot called carbon black. This creates a paint that is very similar to modern gouache or watercolor. It flows smoothly from a reed pen or a brush, and it dries to a matte finish that won't crack when the papyrus is rolled. It's the perfect binder for the written, or rather, the illustrated word. So, the next time you see a painting, remember the unsung hero. The pigment gets all the glory, but it's the humble binder, the water, the egg, the wax, the gum, that does the real work. It's the sticky stuff that turns colored dust into art, holding a vision together for millennia. You've now learned how to make the paint, and how to make it stick. But what about color that doesn't sit on a surface, but sinks right into it? Your journey into color is about to take another turn, into the world of fabric, dye, and the chemical secrets that make them one. You have mastered the art of making paint, of binding pigments to a surface. But now you face a different challenge. You want to color not a wall or a wooden panel, but the very clothes on your back. You want to take a plain, off-white piece of wool or linen and imbue it with a rich, lasting color. You can't just paint it. The paint would be stiff, it would crack, and it would wash out. You need to dye it. This is a whole different kind of chemistry. You've already encountered the sources for some great dyes. The brilliant crimson from the Kermes insect, the sunny yellow from the weld plant, the rosy red from the madder root. You've successfully boiled them in water, creating a beautiful, colored liquid. Excitedly, you plunge a piece of wool into your madder red dye bath. You let it steep for an hour, then pull it out. It's a lovely shade of pinkish red. Success. Or so you think. You rinse the wool in clean water, and to your horror, most of the beautiful color washes right out, leaving you with a sad, pale, vaguely pinkish cloth. What went wrong? You've just discovered the fundamental problem of dyeing. Most natural dyes don't want to stick to textile fibers. The dye molecules and the fiber molecules, whether it's the protein of wool or the cellulose of linen, have no natural chemical attraction to each other. They're like two people at a party who simply refuse to talk. To solve this, you need a matchmaker. You need a chemical middleman that can grab onto the fiber with one hand and the dye molecule with the other. This magical substance is called a mordant. The word mordant comes from the Latin mordere, which means to bite. And that's exactly what a mordant does. It gives the dye something to bite into on the fiber. Mordants are typically metallic salts. The most common one in the ancient world, and for centuries after, was alum. Alum, or potassium aluminum sulfate, is a naturally occurring mineral that looks like a white, crystalline rock. It was mined in places like Egypt and the Greek islands. Here's how you, the ancient dyer, use it. First, you take your clean, wet wool and simmer it in a pot of water with dissolved alum. You're not adding any dye yet. This is a separate, crucial pre-treatment step. As the wool simmers, the aluminum ions from the alum chemically bond to the protein molecules in the wool fiber. You then remove the wool from the alum bath. To the naked eye, it looks exactly the same as before. It's still just wet, white wool. But on a microscopic level, it's been transformed. It's now studded with invisible metallic hooks, ready and waiting to grab dye molecules. Now you prepare your dye bath again, with the madder root or the weld flowers. You take your mordant wool and put it into the hot dye. The magic happens. The dye molecules, which previously had no interest in the wool, are now powerfully attracted to the aluminum ions that are attached to the wool. They form strong, permanent chemical bonds. When you pull the wool out of the dye bath this time, the color is deeper and richer. And when you rinse it, the color stays put. It's now part of the fabric. You have successfully fixed the dye. This process is a genuine historical fact and was the cornerstone of the dyer's art for thousands of years. But here's the really clever part. Different mordants can produce different colors from the same dye. This was the dyer's secret weapon. Let's go back to your madder root dye. With an alum mordant, you get a beautiful, clear red. But what if you mordant the wool with an iron salt instead? You can get iron salts from iron liquor, which is made by soaking rusty nails in vinegar. If you use an iron mordant, your madder dye bath will produce not red, but a deep, somber purplish gray or even black. If you use a tin mordant, you can get a fiery orange red. With a copper mordant, you might get a more brownish red. Suddenly, from one pot of dye, you can create a whole palette of colors, just by changing the mordant. This was the true artistry of the master dyer. It was a complex, multi-step process that felt like alchemy. You were taking a pale root, a white mineral, and a rusty nail and transforming them into a rainbow of permanent colors. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some plants are what we call substantive dyes, meaning they contain their own mordant. One example is the walnut. The husks of walnuts are full of tannins, which are natural mordanting agents. So, you can create a rich, dark brown dye simply by boiling wool with walnut husks. No separate mordanting step is needed. But these types of dyes are the exception, not the rule. For most of the color spectrum, the mordant was a non-negotiable part of the recipe. However, the exact origins and development of mordanting are still a subject of scholarly debate. It's such a counterintuitive process. Who was the first person to figure out that boiling wool in a flavorless white rock before dyeing it would make the color stick? It's not an obvious leap of logic. One theory is that it was discovered by accident. Perhaps a dyer was using a pot that had previously been used to process alum-rich clays for another purpose, and they noticed that the dye took better in that pot. Or maybe they were using water from a stream that naturally had a high mineral content. It was likely a very slow process of trial, error, and observation over generations, with recipes passed down as closely guarded secrets. The discovery of mordanting was a technological revolution. It unlocked the entire world of plant-based colors. Suddenly, the yellows from wild, the reds from madder, the oranges from safflower, and countless other hues from local weeds and flowers could be made permanent and vibrant. It allowed for the creation of patterned textiles using resist dyeing techniques, where you would apply a mordant to only certain parts of the fabric before putting it in the dye bath. You stand back, admiring your skeins of wool, now colored in a dozen different shades, all from one or two plants. You feel like a magician. You've learned the secret handshake that allows the fiber and the dye to connect. It's a secret that depends on invisible chemistry, on the power of a metallic salt to bite into the wool and hold on to color for dear life. But there are still a few dyes, the true aristocrats of the color world, that play by a completely different set of rules, requiring a process even stranger than mordanting. Your journey into the dyer's vat is about to get even more complex. You've mastered the art of mordanting, using metallic salts to bind the colorful souls of plants to your textiles. You feel like you've cracked the dyer's code. But then you encounter a plant that laughs at your alum and your iron. It's a humble-looking shrub with green leaves, and it promises to deliver the richest, most beautiful blue in the world, a blue to rival the precious lapis lazuli. This is the indigo plant. And to unlock its color, you can't just boil it. You have to do something that seems completely backward. You have to rot it. You are now a dyer in ancient India, a place renowned for producing the finest and most potent indigo dye. The process you are about to undertake is one of the most complex and fascinating chemical transformations in the ancient world. It's for a special class of dyes called vat dyes, which also includes that Tyrian purple from the sea snails. And it all starts with a paradox. The blue dye molecule in the indigo plant, called indigotin, is not actually blue in its natural state, and it is completely insoluble in water. You can't get it out of the leaf by simply boiling it. Your first step is to harvest the fresh indigo leaves and pack them into a large stone vat or pit. You cover them with water and weigh them down. Now you wait. For a day or two, the leaves just sit there, steeping. The water begins to turn a sickly yellowish green and starts to bubble. A process of fermentation has begun. Bacteria in the water are breaking down the compounds in the leaves, releasing the precursor to the blue dye, a substance called indican. This indican further breaks down into indoxyl, which is the key ingredient. This fermentation vat smells swampy and unpleasant, a cousin to the stench of the Tyrian purple vats. The world of ancient dyes, it seems, is not a fragrant one. After the fermentation is complete, you drain off the yellow-green liquid into a second vat, leaving the soggy, spent leaves behind. This liquid now holds the precious indoxyl. But it's still not blue, and it's still not a dye. You now begin the second stage, aeration. You and your fellow dyers take large wooden rakes or paddles and you begin to beat the liquid, splashing it, churning it, forcing as much air into it as possible. It's hard, rhythmic work that can go on for hours under the hot Indian sun. As you beat the liquid, a stunning transformation occurs. The oxygen from the air reacts with the yellow indoxyl. The liquid starts to change color, from yellow-green to a deep turquoise, and then to a dark, inky blue. What's happening is that two molecules of indoxyl are joining together and oxidizing to form one molecule of the final blue dye, indigotin. As you continue to beat the water, this blue indigotin, which is insoluble, begins to precipitate out of the solution. It forms a sludgy, blue sediment at the bottom of the vat. You have now, finally, made your blue pigment. You let the sludge settle, drain off the water, and collect the thick blue paste, which can be dried into cakes for storage or trade. This is the famous Indian indigo that was exported all over the ancient world. But you're still not done. You've made the blue pigment, but you still can't dye with it because it's insoluble. If you put wool in a pot with this pigment, you just get a bunch of blue gunk on the surface. To turn it back into a usable dye, you have to perform a final, seemingly magical act of reverse chemistry. You have to reduce the indigo, which means removing the oxygen you just worked so hard to add. You prepare a new vat, this time with an alkaline solution, using stale urine or wood ash lye to raise the pH. You add your blue indigo pigment paste. Then you add a reducing agent, something that will consume oxygen. In ancient times, this could be a number of things, but a common choice was to add a substance that would trigger another round of fermentation, like bran or molasses. The bacteria from this new fermentation would consume all the oxygen in the vat, chemically reducing the blue, insoluble indigotin back into the yellowish-green, water-soluble indoxyl. Your dye bath is now a murky, greenish-yellow liquid, often with a coppery, iridescent film on top. It looks like pond scum and smells even worse. This is the living indigo vat. It's a delicate ecosystem of bacteria and chemistry that a master dyer had to tend like a living creature. Now, finally, you can dye. You take your wool or cotton yarn, and you submerge it in this unappealing yellow-green liquid. You hold it under for a few minutes, gently moving it around. When you pull it out, it is not blue, but a ghostly, pale yellow-green. You hang the dripping yarn up in the air. And then, right before your eyes, the miracle happens for a second time. The oxygen in the air begins to react with the indoxyl that has soaked into the fibers. The yarn starts to change color, from yellow to green, and then, within minutes, to a deep, beautiful blue. The dye molecule, now trapped inside the fibers, has oxidized back into its permanent, insoluble blue form. The color has materialized out of thin air. It's one of the most magical moments in all of ancient craft. For a deeper blue, you simply repeat the process. Dip in the yellow vat, pull out into the air, and watch it turn blue again and again. This complex, multi-stage process is a well-documented historical fact and was one of the pinnacles of ancient chemistry. A quirky tidbit is that a similar plant, woad, Isatis tinctoria, was used in Europe to get the same indigo dye. However, woad leaves contain much less dye than the Indian indigo plant, so the color was generally weaker. When Indian indigo began to be imported into Europe in larger quantities, it was so superior that European woad growers panicked, fearing for their livelihood. They actually started a smear campaign, calling indigo a devil's dye, and getting laws passed to ban its use. It's a classic story of an old technology trying, and ultimately failing, to fight off a superior new one. Scholars still debate the exact timeline and methods of early indigo vat management. The chemistry is so complex and sensitive. How did ancient dyers, with no knowledge of bacteria or molecules, figure out how to keep their vats alive? How did they know when to add more bran or when the vat was exhausted? It was a craft based entirely on experience, on the look, smell, and even taste, a terrifying thought of the vat. The dyer's knowledge was a form of folk science, passed down through generations, full of secret recipes and ritualistic practices that, beneath the surface, were controlling a sophisticated biochemical process. You stand back and admire your yarn, now a brilliant, deep blue that will not fade. You have coaxed it out of a green leaf through a cycle of fermentation, oxidation, reduction, and then oxidation again. You didn't just dye this yarn, you performed a small resurrection. You have truly earned your blue. You are no longer a craftsman, covered in pigment dust or the stench of the dye vat. You are a citizen of Rome, the bustling, chaotic, magnificent heart of a vast empire. You are walking through the crowded forum, and all around you is a living demonstration of the power of color. Here, color is not just about beauty or art, it is a language, a rigid and instantly recognizable code of social status. And nowhere is this code more clearly written than on the quintessential Roman garment, the toga. The toga itself is an unwieldy piece of clothing, a large, semicircular swathe of heavy wool that is difficult to put on and impractical for any kind of manual labor. That's precisely the point. To wear a toga is to show that you are a citizen, and that you don't need to work with your hands. But not all togas are created equal. The color and decoration of your toga tell everyone who sees you exactly who you are in the rigid Roman hierarchy. Most citizens, if they are wearing a toga at all, wear the toga virilis or toga of manhood. It's the color of undyed, cleaned wool, a creamy, off-white. This is the basic uniform of the Roman citizen body. It signifies your rights and your place in the political system. But it's also a bit bland. You look around the forum and see a sea of these whitish garments. To stand out, you need a splash of color. If you are a candidate running for political office, you will wear the toga candida. You take your normal toga and rub it with brilliant white chalk. This makes it unnaturally, dazzlingly white. The word candida means pure white, and it's the origin of our modern word, candidate. The purpose is simple, to make you stand out in the crowd, to look pure, and to be easily identifiable to potential voters. It's a bit like a walking billboard. It's also a nightmare to keep clean, which is a subtle statement in itself. You are too important to be doing anything that might get you dirty. Now your eyes are drawn to a group of men who carry real authority. These are the magistrates and senators. They wear the toga praetexta. This toga is distinguished by a single, woven stripe of purple along its border. Remember our Phoenician snails? This is where their precious, stinking dye ends up. This stripe of Tyrian purple signifies that the wearer holds a high office of state. The sons of senators were also allowed to wear this toga, a constant reminder to everyone of their family status. The purple is a visual barrier, a line that separates the ruling class from the common citizen. Then you see him, the emperor, or perhaps a general celebrating a triumph, a grand parade for a major military victory. He is wearing the toga picta, or painted toga. This garment is not just edged in purple, it is solid Tyrian purple, a color so expensive it was literally worth more than its weight in gold. And it is further embellished with elaborate gold embroidery, depicting scenes of victory or divine favor. To wear this toga is to be semi-divine, to be the living embodiment of Roman power and glory. This is a well-known historical fact. The sumptuary laws of the Roman Empire explicitly restricted who could wear certain colors, with solid purple being the most heavily regulated color of all. Color was, quite literally, law. But what about everyone else? The vast majority of people in the Roman Empire were not citizens who could wear a toga. They were slaves, laborers, women, foreigners, and children. Their clothing was a far more practical tunic, and its color was dictated by what was cheap and available. You see a world of dull, earthy colors. The browns from walnut husks, the drab yellows and grays from cheap iron mordant plant dyes, the faded tans of unbleached linen. These were the colors of the working class. A bright color was a luxury. A clean, bright garment of any color was a sign that you had the time and resources for laundry, which was a luxury in itself. Roman laundries, or phalonicas, used some rather startling cleaning agents, including stale urine for its ammonia content, to bleach and clean clothes. That dazzling toga candida likely had a very close encounter with a pot of pee. Here's a quirky tidbit: even the color of mourning was codified. While we might associate black with funerals, a Roman citizen in mourning wore a toga pulla, which was a toga made of naturally dark-colored wool, from a brown or black sheep. It wasn't dyed black, but was a dirty, or dark natural color, signifying a neglect of personal appearance due to grief. To dye a toga black would have been an unnecessary expense during a time of sorrow. So, even the absence of bright color was a specific and meaningful statement. Historians still argue about the exact shades and the consistency of these colors. Was every batch of Tyrian purple the same shade? Probably not. The purple stripe could likely range from a deep violet to a reddish crimson, depending on the snails, the dyer, and the region. And what about fakes? There was a thriving industry in creating imitation purples. A clever dyer using the double dyeing method, a base of cheap blue woad topped with a red from kermes or madder, could create a convincing knockoff. A provincial magistrate might wear a toga with a stripe of this imitation purple, hoping no one with a more discerning eye would notice. The pressure to display status through color created a market for affordable illusions. You continue your walk, leaving the forum and heading towards the markets. Here, the world becomes more colorful again. You see merchants selling vibrant bolts of cloth from across the empire. A brilliant red from an Egyptian workshop, dyed with kermes. A rich blue from India, made with that magical indigo. A bright yellow from Gaul, from the weld plant. These colors are commodities, symbols of far-flung trade and wealth. A wealthy woman passes by in a litter, wearing a silk tunic dyed a delicate saffron yellow, a color so fugitive and expensive that it silently screams, "I am rich enough to wear a dress that will only look this good for a month." In Rome, you learn that color is never just color. It's a uniform, a resume, and a price tag all rolled into one. It tells a story of power, of law, of commerce, and of the vast social gulf between the man in the off-white toga and the emperor in his robe of blood-dark purple. The technology of color you've been exploring, the pigments and dyes, finds its ultimate expression here, not on a wall, but woven into the very fabric of society. You have seen the power of black and the earthy honesty of ochre. You've used soft chalk and limestone for a gentle, muted white. But as art evolves, becoming more refined and obsessed with capturing the play of light, there arises a demand for a white that is not just a neutral background, but an active, brilliant, and powerful color in its own right. You need a white that is opaque, that can cover other colors completely, and that has a bright, clean luminosity. For this, you will turn to a substance as revolutionary as it was dangerous: lead white. You are now an artist or an artisan, perhaps in ancient Greece or Rome, or later in a Renaissance workshop that inherited this ancient knowledge. You're no longer satisfied with the grayish, transparent quality of chalk. You need the best white there is. And for over 2,000 years, that meant lead white. The process of making it is another feat of corrosive chemistry, similar to how you made verdigris, but with a different metal and a more involved setup. This is the stack process, a method described in detail by ancient writers like Pliny and Vitruvius. First, you need lead. You cast the lead into thin strips or coils. Then, you place these lead coils into a clay pot. In the bottom of the pot, you pour a small amount of an acid, usually vinegar. The crucial part is that the lead coils are placed on a small grate, or ledge above the vinegar, not touching it. The lead needs to be exposed to the fumes, not the liquid itself. You then take dozens of these prepared pots and stack them in a shed or a pit. You surround them with a fermenting organic material. The traditional choice was horse manure. The fermenting manure serves two purposes. First, it generates a steady, low heat, which helps the vinegar evaporate and speeds up the chemical reaction. Second, as it decomposes, it releases carbon dioxide. The combination of heat, acetic acid vapor from the vinegar, and carbon dioxide from the dung works a slow, transformative magic on the lead. You seal the pit and wait. For 1 to 3 months, you let nature, or rather, decomposing manure, do the work. When you finally unearth the pots, the metallic lead coils are gone. In their place is a thick, heavy crust of a brilliant, pure white substance. This is basic lead carbonate, the pigment we call lead white. You scrape this crust off, wash it to remove any impurities, and then grind it into a fine powder. The resulting pigment is unlike any other white you have. It's dense, opaque, and has a wonderful, buttery texture when mixed with a binder. It covers other colors with a single coat. When used to make highlights, it seems to shine with its own inner light. This is a well-known historical fact. Lead white was the most important white pigment in art for more than 2,000 years, from classical antiquity right up until the 19th century. It was an essential component of almost every painter's palette. Its opacity and brightness were simply unmatched by any other white pigment available. It was so fundamental that many artists would prepare their wooden panels or canvases with a ground layer, or gesso, that contained lead white, creating a brilliant, non-absorbent surface on which to paint. But as you probably guessed, there's a terrible catch. Lead is a neurotoxin. It's a cumulative poison that the body absorbs easily. Every step of this process, from casting the lead, to scraping the corroded white crust, to grinding the dry pigment, was incredibly dangerous. The fine white dust would settle everywhere, getting on your hands, in your food, in the air you breathe. Artists who used it frequently suffered from painter's colic, a euphemism for acute lead poisoning, which caused excruciating abdominal pain, tremors, and neurological damage. The pursuit of a brighter white came at the cost of the artist's own health. Here's a quirky and rather dark tidbit about its other uses. Because of its smooth, opaque, and skin-lightening properties, lead white was also the primary ingredient in high-end cosmetics for centuries. Roman and Egyptian noblewomen would use a makeup called cerussa, which was just lead white mixed with a bit of water or fat, to whiten their faces, achieving the pale complexion that was considered the height of aristocratic beauty. They were, of course, slowly poisoning themselves in the name of fashion. It's a terrifying thought. The same toxic substance used to paint a goddess on a temple wall was being used to create a divine pallor on a mortal face. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Suddenly that doesn't seem so bad. Scholars still debate the full extent to which ancient artisans were aware of the dangers of lead. Writers like Pliny and Vitruvius certainly described the symptoms of lead poisoning in the miners and processors of the metal. They knew it was dangerous work. But did the average artist or cosmetic user connect their own health problems, the stomach pains, the shaking sickness, to the beautiful white powder they used every day? It's hard to say. The symptoms of chronic lead poisoning are slow and insidious, easily mistaken for other ailments. For many, the undeniable aesthetic benefits of the pigment probably overshadowed the vague and poorly understood risks. You now have this wonderful, dangerous pigment. Mixed with oil, it becomes the most versatile paint on your palette. You can use it to paint the crisp white folds of a philosopher's robe, the glint of light on a soldier's helmet, the white foam of a wave crashing on the shore. You can also mix it with your other colors. Adding lead white to your precious ultramarine creates a range of beautiful, soft sky blues. Mixed with your earth pigments, it creates a whole vocabulary of subtle beiges, creams, and grays. It is the great modifier, the key to controlling the value and tone of your entire palette. The creation of lead white is a story of human ingenuity and hubris. It's a story of harnessing decay, the corrosion of metal and the rot of manure, to create a symbol of purity and light. It represents a pivotal moment where the desire for a specific aesthetic effect completely overrode the obvious dangers. For 2 millennia, to be a serious painter was to have a pot of this brilliant, toxic white on your table. You had to have it. The quality of your work depended on it. And you just had to hope it didn't kill you first. You are now a seasoned artist. Your workshop is filled with pigments sourced from all over the known world. You have your earthy ochres, your divine lapis lazuli, your toxic orpiment, and your brilliant, dangerous lead white. You understand their properties, or so you think. You've mastered making paint and making it stick. But today, you are confronted with a new and heartbreaking problem. Your beautiful painting is self-destructing. The brilliant yellow you painted last month has turned a sickly brown. The once vibrant green has faded to a dull gray. Your masterpiece is becoming a muddy, discolored mess. You have just had your first encounter with fugitive colors and bad batches. A fugitive color is a pigment, or dye that is not permanent. It's a color on the run, fleeing from the light. The most common culprit, as you already know, is any color derived from plants or flowers without a proper mordant or fixing process. Your beautiful saffron yellow, that delicate rose from safflower petals, the temporary green from buckthorn berries, these are the heartbreakers of the pigment world. They are made of complex organic molecules that are easily broken down by the energy in ultraviolet light. You hang your painting in a sunny room, and you are essentially cooking the color right off the canvas. You learn this the hard way. You complete a beautiful portrait for a wealthy patron. You use a delicate, plant-based lake pigment for the rosy blush on the cheeks. It looks perfect. The patron is thrilled. A few years later, you see the portrait again, and the cheeks are a pale, ghostly white. The life has drained out of the face. Your reputation suffers. From now on, you will stick to the more reliable, if less delicate, red ochre for your flesh tones. Lesson learned. But the problem is more complex than just fading. Some pigments are chemically unstable and can transform over time, regardless of the light. We've met some of these troublemakers already. Cinnabar, that brilliant mercury-based red, was known to sometimes darken to a dull, metallic black. You might paint a vibrant red robe, only to find it looking like a lump of coal years later. Art historians and conservation scientists still argue over the precise chemical mechanism behind this darkening. Is it a light-induced transformation of the red hexagonal form of mercury sulfide into a black cubic form? Or is it a surface reaction with trace elements in the air? For you, the artist, the why doesn't matter as much as the tragic result. Your fiery red has died. Then there are the hostile pigments, the antisocial chemicals on your palette that refuse to play nicely with others. Orpiment, the brilliant arsenic-based yellow, is the prime offender. As you learned, it can react disastrously with lead and copper-based pigments. Imagine you've painted a beautiful golden brooch, using orpiment, with a bright white highlight, using lead white. The two pigments touch. Over the years, a slow chemical reaction takes place at the border, and a dark black line of lead sulfide forms, creating an ugly black halo around your highlight. Your delicate detail is ruined. Verdigris, the copper-based green, is another culprit. It can react with sulfur-containing pigments like orpiment, and it was also known to be acidic enough to corrode the very parchment or panel it was painted on. A quirky but historically significant example of a bad batch involves one of the most prestigious pigments, ultramarine blue from lapis lazuli. You've gone to great expense to acquire it. You've used the painstaking resin-dough process to purify it. But if you don't do it perfectly, if you fail to wash out all the acidic residue from the process, you can get what is called ultramarine sickness. Your divine blue, the color of the heavens, slowly develops a pale, leprous-looking grayish-yellow crust. The pigment itself is stable, but the poor processing has doomed it. It's a classic case of user error, a devastating mistake for any artist working with the most expensive color on their palette. Even the binders can betray you. If you mix your pigments in linseed oil to make oil paint, you have to know that the oil itself will yellow significantly as it ages. This can dramatically alter the appearance of your colors. A pure lead white will look creamy and yellow after a century. A pale blue might take on a greenish cast as the yellowing oil filters the light. This is a well-known historical fact that conservationists deal with constantly. When they clean an old master painting, removing layers of yellowed varnish and oil, the colors can suddenly appear shockingly bright and cool, much closer to how the artist originally intended them to look. Sometimes, the problem isn't a fugitive pigment, but a mistaken identity. A less than honest merchant might sell you a yellow pigment that he claims is the durable mineral orpiment, but which is actually a cheaper, fading plant-based lake pigment. Or he might sell you a Tyrian purple that is really just a clever fake made from woad and madder. You paint with it, thinking it's the real, permanent deal, only to see it fade or change color over time. The ancient art materials market was just as full of swindlers and knockoffs as any market today. There was no FDA for pigments to ensure quality control. You learn to be a more cynical, more scientific artist. You start testing your materials. You might paint a small sample of a new pigment on a piece of wood and leave it on a sunny windowsill for a few months to see if it fades. You become a master of your craft not just by learning how to apply the paint, but by learning the secret vices and vulnerabilities of each color. You learn to keep your sulfur-based yellows away from your lead-based whites. You learn to apply verdigris between layers of varnish to isolate it from other pigments. You learn to trust the dull but reliable earth colors over the flashy but fleeting organic ones. Your palette becomes a collection of trusted friends, and you eye any newcomer with deep suspicion. The history of art is not just a history of masterpieces. It's also a silent history of countless failed experiments, of tragic chemical reactions, of colors that died young. Every beautiful, well-preserved ancient painting you see is a survivor. It's a testament to an artist who not only had a vision, but also had the deep, hard-won chemical knowledge to give that vision a chance at immortality. Up until now, your focus has been on color for images, painting a bison, a god, or a portrait. But now your role shifts. You are not a painter, but a scribe. You work in a quiet scriptorium in Alexandria, or perhaps a monastic library in early medieval Europe. Your task is not to create a sprawling mural, but to record words, a philosopher's thoughts, a legal decree, the sacred text of your religion. For this, you need a different kind of color, a different kind of tool. You need ink. The fundamental difference between paint and ink is viscosity and particle size. Paint is generally thick, designed to sit on a surface. Ink needs to be a fine, flowing liquid, capable of being drawn into a narrow line by a pen without clogging it. Your journey into the world of color now moves from the pot and the brush to the vial and the reed. Your most basic and important ink is black. The go-to recipe for black ink for thousands of years is carbon black. It's an incredibly simple and effective ink. The pigment is soot, plain and simple. But it's not just any soot scraped from the back of a chimney. For the highest quality ink, you need a very fine, pure black soot. The best way to make this is to burn something that produces very little ash, like oil or resin. You set up a small oil lamp, perhaps with a particularly smoky wick. Above the flame, you place a cool ceramic or metal dish. As the lamp burns, a fine, fluffy, deep black soot collects on the underside of the dish. This is lamp black. You carefully scrape this delicate powder off. Now you need a binder. Remember our friend gum arabic, the sap from the acacia tree? It's the perfect binder for ink. It's a light, flexible adhesive that dissolves in water. You take your carbon black soot, mix it with a solution of water and gum arabic, and perhaps add a drop of wine or vinegar to act as a preservative. You grind the mixture with a small mortar and pestle until it is perfectly smooth and free of any gritty particles. The result is a deep, permanent, waterproof black ink. When it dries, the carbon particles are locked onto the papyrus or parchment by the gum arabic binder. Because carbon is a chemically inert element, the ink is incredibly stable. It won't fade in the light or react with the air. A well-known historical fact is that the majority of ancient Egyptian and Greco-Roman manuscripts that survive today were written with this type of carbon ink. Its permanence is the reason we can still read them. You can take this ink paste and press it into a solid cake or stick. To use it, you just dip a wet brush onto the cake, just like with modern watercolor paints. This made it easily portable for scribes and merchants. But as you move into the medieval period, and the primary writing surface shifts from papyrus to parchment, made from animal skin, a new type of ink rises to prominence. This is iron gall ink. It will become the standard writing ink of the Western world for over 1,000 years, from the time of the late Roman Empire well into the 20th century. And its recipe is a bizarre and wonderful bit of forest chemistry. To make iron gall ink, you need two main ingredients. The first is tannic acid. You get this from oak galls, which are strange, round growths that form on oak trees. They are created when a gall wasp lays its eggs in the tree's tissue. The tree responds by forming this hard, woody ball around the larva. These galls are incredibly rich in tannins. You collect them, crush them into a powder, and steep them in water. Rainwater was preferred for its purity, or wine. This creates a brownish, acidic liquid. The second ingredient is an iron salt, specifically ferrous sulfate, also known as green vitriol or copperas. You can buy this from an apothecary, or you can make your own by leaving iron nails to rust in a sulfuric acid solution, a process best left to the professionals. You dissolve this greenish salt in water. Now for the chemical reaction. You mix the two solutions together, the tannic acid from the oak galls and the iron sulfate. At first, nothing much happens. The liquid might turn a pale gray or brownish color. But when you apply this ink to parchment with a quill pen and it is exposed to the air, it oxidizes. The iron ions and the tannic acid react to form a new compound, ferric tannate, which is a deep, velvety, blue-black color. The ink literally develops on the page as it dries. Iron gall ink was beloved for its deep, rich blackness. But it had a dark side. It is a highly acidic ink. Over the centuries, it can literally eat its way through the parchment or paper it's written on. Many precious historical manuscripts are now in a fragile condition because the iron gall ink has burned holes where the letters were written. Conservators now face the delicate task of deacidifying these documents to halt the degradation. So, while carbon ink was stable and gentle, iron gall ink was aggressive, slowly destroying the very words it was meant to preserve. It's a tragic irony. Of course, scribes didn't just write in black. For headings, important passages, or the first letter of a chapter, they used color. This is where we get the term rubric, from the Latin rubrica, meaning red ochre. A scribe would use a red ink, often made from grinding up either red ochre or the more brilliant but toxic cinnabar/vermilion and mixing it with a binder like egg white, glaire, or gum arabic. This practice of rubrication is why old manuscripts have those beautiful red titles and initials. A quirky but important tidbit: what about blue ink? A scribe wanting to write in blue faced the challenge. Grinding up azurite or lapis lazuli resulted in a gritty pigment that would clog a quill pen. Egyptian blue was also too coarse. The solution was often to use a dye instead of a pigment. They might use a blue dye from the woad plant, or perhaps a lake pigment made from a blue flower, thickened with a lot of gum arabic to give it the right consistency for writing. These colored inks were often less permanent than the black ones, but they added invaluable beauty and clarity to the page. Scholars still debate the full range of ink recipes used in different monastic scriptoria. Each monastery likely had its own secret variations. Did they add honey to make the ink flow better? A pinch of soot to their iron gall ink to make it visible before it oxidized? The recipes that survive are often vague, assuming a level of background knowledge that has long been lost. Recreating these inks is a major field of study for historians and conservationists, helping them to understand, date, and preserve these precious windows into the past. You hold your finished page of the manuscript. The body of the text is a crisp, dark black. The chapter heading glows in a rich vermilion red. You have not just copied words, you have given them form, hierarchy, and beauty. You have used the colors of the earth and the strange chemistry of trees and metal to turn spoken language into a durable, visible art form. You have painted on stone, on plaster, on wood, and on papyrus. You have dyed the clothes that cover your body. But now you turn to the oldest and most personal canvas of all, human skin. The desire to adorn our own bodies is as ancient as the desire to make a mark on a cave wall. You are about to explore how your hard-won knowledge of pigments was used for the art of cosmetics and tattooing, a way to broadcast identity, status, and beauty directly from your own face and body. Let's travel back to ancient Egypt, a civilization famously obsessed with cosmetics, used by both men and women of all social classes. You are a wealthy noble, preparing for a festival. You sit before a small, ornate mirror of polished bronze. Your cosmetic kit, a beautiful box of carved wood or ivory, is laid out before you, filled with little pots of color. Your most important cosmetic is kohl, the iconic black eyeliner of the ancient Egyptians. It's not just for beauty, it has practical and magical purposes. The recipe is not simple soot. Your kohl is made from a finely ground dark gray mineral called galena, which is lead sulfide. Yes, another lead-based product. To make it, you grind the galena into an almost microscopic powder using a slate palette and a stone grinder. You then mix this powder with a bit of oil or animal fat to create a thick, creamy paste. You apply it with a small, smooth stick of wood, bronze, or ivory. You draw a thick, almond-shaped line around your eyes, extending out towards your temples. This heavy black eyeliner served several purposes. A key historical fact is that the Egyptians believed it had protective magical properties, invoking the power of the gods Horus and Ra to ward off the evil eye and protect the wearer from harm. On a more practical level, the dark kohl would have helped reduce the glare of the bright Egyptian sun, acting like a primitive form of sunglasses. And recent scientific studies have suggested another, unintentional benefit. The lead compounds in the kohl, in very low doses, may have stimulated the immune system to fight off the bacterial eye infections that were common in the marshy Nile Valley. It's a fascinating case where a toxic substance might have had a paradoxical medicinal effect. But your eyes aren't finished. You also need eyeshadow. For this, you reach for a pot of powdered green malachite. Remember our friend, the green copper mineral? You apply this vibrant green powder to your eyelids, a splash of color that symbolizes life and rebirth. Both the black kohl and the green eyeshadow were central to the Egyptian look for thousands of years. Next, you turn to your lips and cheeks. For a touch of red, you use a paste made from finely ground red ochre mixed with a little oil or beeswax. You might also use a more potent stain derived from plants, or perhaps even, if you are very wealthy, a cosmetic colored with the residue from winemaking. And let's not forget your skin. You might use that dangerously pale lead white makeup, the Sarasa we encountered before, to lighten your complexion, a sign that you do not have to labor outside in the sun. Your face is now a painted mask, a statement of your health, wealth, and divine protection. Now let's journey north, to the world of the Celts and the Picts in ancient Britain. The Romans who encountered them wrote with fascination about their practice of body painting. You are a Pictish warrior, preparing for battle. The name, Picts, given to you by the Romans, literally means the painted people. You take a pot of a dark blue paste, made from the woad plant, the same plant used to make a less potent version of indigo dye. You smear this all over your body, painting fearsome swirling patterns and animal symbols on your skin. The effect is terrifying to your enemies. It makes you look wild, inhuman, and fearless. It is psychological warfare, expressed in color. But what if you want a design that is more than just paint deep? What if you want it to last forever? This is the art of the tattoo. You are now a Scythian nomad on the vast Eurasian steppe, or perhaps a Polynesian navigator on a remote Pacific island. Tattooing is a core part of your culture. The process is slow and painful. The tattoo artist uses a set of sharp tools, perhaps a needle made of bone, or a comb-like instrument made of boar's tusk. They dip the tool into a pigment, almost always a simple carbon black made from soot. Then, they rhythmically tap the tool into your skin, driving the pigment deep into the dermis layer. The designs they create are not random doodles. They tell your life story. They mark your lineage, your rank in society, your spiritual achievements, and the gods you are dedicated to. A famous archaeological find, the Siberian Ice Maiden, a Scythian noblewoman preserved in the permafrost for 2,500 years, was found to have intricate tattoos of mythical creatures covering her arms and shoulders. These were not crude marks. They were sophisticated works of art, a permanent record of her identity worn on her skin. A quirky tidbit is the variety of pigments used in ancient tattooing beyond simple black. While carbon was by far the most common, some cultures experimented. Scholars still debate the full palette of ancient tattoo inks. There is some evidence for the use of red ochre for reddish tattoos, and it's theorized that other mineral or plant-based pigments could have been used, though their permanence and safety would have been highly questionable. The famous Otzi the Iceman, the 5,300-year-old mummy found in the Alps, had over 60 tattoos, all simple lines and crosses, made of soot. His tattoos were not decorative but are believed to have been therapeutic, placed on joints and areas of the back that showed evidence of arthritis. They may represent an ancient form of acupuncture or pain treatment. So you see, the human body itself becomes a text, a canvas, a statement. The Egyptian cosmetic box is a portable palette for daily transformation. The Pictish war paint is a temporary mask of terror. And the Scythian tattoo is an indelible autobiography, written in a language of soot and skin. The same drive that led you to paint a hand on a rock wall has led you to paint your own face, to inscribe your very being with the colors you have learned to master. It is the ultimate expression of the idea that color is identity. You have traveled from prehistoric caves to the banks of the Nile, from the stinking bats of Tyre to the misty Isles of the Picts. You have seen how humanity, for millennia, pieced together a vibrant world of color through ingenuity, danger, and sheer force of will. But now, you take a great leap forward, landing in the present day. You are in a modern laboratory, surrounded by gleaming equipment. The ancient pots and grinding stones have been replaced by mass spectrometers, electron microscopes, and X-ray fluorescence analyzers. Here, in this clean, well-lit room, the lost and faded colors of the past are being brought back to life. For centuries, our understanding of ancient colors was based on two things: the ambiguous descriptions left by writers like Pliny the Elder, and what our own eyes could see on surviving artifacts. But what we see today is not what the ancient artists created. Remember the fugitive colors, the unstable pigments, the yellowing binders? The true ancient world was far more colorful than the faded, muted version we see in museums. Today, science is allowing us to peel back the layers of time and see the past in its original, shocking vibrancy. Let's start with one of the most famous rediscoveries. You are looking at a pure white marble statue from ancient Greece or Rome. For centuries, from the Renaissance onwards, these stark white forms were held up as the ideal of classical beauty. The idea of classical white became synonymous with purity, rationality, and high art. But it was all a colossal misunderstanding. A scientist next to you aims a device at the statue. They are using a technique called raking light, shining a light from a very low angle across the surface. Suddenly, you can see faint, almost invisible scratches and variations in the texture of the marble. These are the telltale footprints of long-vanished paint. Then, they use more advanced techniques. Ultraviolet visible spectroscopy can detect the chemical traces of binders. X-ray fluorescence can identify the metallic elements in the pigments: the lead in lead white, the copper in malachite, the mercury in cinnabar. Slowly, a new image emerges. This is a well-known historical fact that has revolutionized art history. Classical statues were not originally white. They were painted in bright, vivid, almost garish colors. The statue's hair might have been a brilliant orpiment yellow, its lips a startling cinnabar red, its robes decorated with intricate patterns in Egyptian blue and verdigris green. The effect is not the serene, minimalist aesthetic we imagined. It's bold, lifelike, and to our modern eyes, a little bit shocking. The science has revealed a lost world of color, forcing us to completely reevaluate our understanding of classical art. Digital reconstructions now allow us to see these statues as they were meant to be seen, a ride of color and life. The same science is being used to solve ancient mysteries. Remember Maya blue, the indestructible turquoise pigment whose recipe was lost for centuries? It was a combination of laboratory analysis and careful reading of ethnographic accounts that finally cracked the code in the late 20th century. Scientists identified the two key ingredients, indigo dye and palygorskite clay, and through experimentation, they rediscovered the gentle heating process that fuses them together. They could finally recreate this marvel of ancient nanotechnology, proving that the Maya were master chemists. And what about those fugitive lake pigments, the ones made from plants that faded away, leaving no visible trace? Scientists are now developing incredibly sensitive techniques, like surface-enhanced Raman spectroscopy, SCRS, that can detect the faintest molecular echo of these lost dyes. They can take a microscopic sample from a painting, a sample invisible to the naked eye, and identify the specific organic molecules of, say, the madder root or the weld plant. This allows them to digitally reconstruct the original color scheme of a painting, revealing, for example, that a drapery that now appears a dull brown was once a vibrant purple, created by layering a blue indigo glaze over a red madder lake. It's like a form of color archaeology. A quirky and fun part of this field is experimental archaeology. Instead of just analyzing the final product, researchers try to recreate the entire ancient process. They get their hands dirty. They build Roman-era furnaces to make Egyptian blue. They gather oak galls and rusty nails to brew batches of iron gall ink. They learn to crack murex snail shells and endure the legendary stench of a Tyrian purple vat. This hands-on approach provides invaluable insights that lab analysis alone cannot. You can't understand the true difficulty of grinding malachite to the perfect consistency until you've tried it yourself. You can't appreciate the skill of an indigo dyer until you've tried to keep a fermentation vat from dying. Scholars still argue over minor details of these reconstructed recipes, but the process of trying, failing, and trying again brings us closer to the mindset and the material reality of the ancient artisan. You are no longer just a creator of color, but a detective. The ancient pigments are your clues. A trace of tin might reveal a well-dyed textile was mordant to be a brighter yellow. The presence of bromine is the smoking gun for genuine Tyrian purple. The specific type of clay mineral can help trace a piece of pottery back to its village of origin. The entire ancient world, which once seemed muted and distant, is snapping back into focus, in full and glorious technicolor. This new knowledge allows us to preserve what's left with greater care. Knowing that a pigment is light-sensitive allows museums to set appropriate lighting levels. Knowing that a pigment is acidic helps conservators develop targeted treatments. We are becoming the guardians of this ancient legacy of color, using our own advanced science to protect the fruits of an ancient one. The conversation between past and present has never been more vibrant. You stand there in that clean, modern laboratory, looking at a tiny vial of recreated Maya blue or a smear of perfectly synthesized Egyptian blue. You hold in your hand a color that, for an ancient artisan, represented a lifetime of knowledge, a perilous journey, or a dangerous secret. For you, it's a scientific curiosity. You can pull out your phone and, in seconds, access a digital color wheel with 16.7 million distinct shades, each one perfectly reproducible, each one available at the click of a button. The epic, millennia-long struggle you've just witnessed has culminated in a world so saturated with color that we have become completely blind to its magic. Think about it. You can walk into a hardware store and be confronted with a wall of paint swatches with names like Whispering Savannah or Gentle Twilight. There are 1,000 shades of off-white alone. An ancient Roman, whose best white was a toxic powder made from lead and horse manure, would weep at the sight. The quest that defined entire economies, that launched voyages, that poisoned artists and adorned emperors, is now an aisle at Home Depot. It's the ultimate victory, so complete that it has become invisible. The great turning point, the event that truly ended the ancient era of color, happened in 1856. A young English chemist named William Henry Perkin, just 18 years old, was trying to synthesize quinine to treat malaria. His experiment failed, leaving him with a beaker of dark, sticky sludge. While trying to clean it out with alcohol, he noticed the sludge dissolved to create a brilliant, intense purple liquid. He had accidentally created the world's first synthetic organic dye, aniline purple, which he named mauve. This is a major historical fact. Perkin's discovery launched the synthetic dye industry. Suddenly, a color that rivaled the legendary Tyrian purple could be mass-produced in a factory from coal tar, a cheap industrial waste product. A teenager in a lab had made thousands of years of snail harvesting obsolete overnight. Soon, synthetic versions of red, blue, yellow, and every other color followed, and the world was flooded with cheap, bright, permanent color. This explosion of color leads to a fascinating and still unanswered question. Scholars and philosophers still argue whether the availability of new colors and color names actually changes human perception. Did people in ancient cultures who had only one word for both, blue and green, perceive the world differently? When a vibrant, stable new color like Maya blue or Tyrian purple entered their visual vocabulary, did it sharpen their ability to see that color, to think with it, to dream in it? Did the invention of color create new thoughts? It's a chicken and egg problem of the mind, a debate about whether our language shapes our reality, or our reality shapes our language. As the 19th century synthesized new colors, it also developed a strange and morbid taste for an old one. For a time, a popular pigment among European artists was mummy brown. And yes, it was exactly what it sounds like. This was a rich brown pigment made from the ground-up remains of ancient Egyptian mummies, both human and feline, which were being imported into Europe by the ton. The resin-soaked linen wrappings and flesh created a unique pigment. It's a truly quirky and gruesome fact. Artists eventually abandoned the color, partly out of taste and decency, and partly because the quality was so inconsistent. You never knew if your tube of paint was made from a pharaoh or a commoner. That joke probably landed better in the 1880s. But the legacy of the ancient world is not just in a few obsolete, ghoulish pigments. It's baked into our very language. When you talk about a vermilion, red, you are unknowingly speaking a word derived from the Latin for little worm, a ghost of the Kermes insect. When you hear ultramarine, you hear its story. From beyond the sea, a whisper of the long, perilous journey from the mountains of Afghanistan. The DNA of that ancient quest is everywhere. It is in the fundamental chemistry that allows a modern inkjet printer to work, a direct descendant of the scribe's carbon black and the dyer's mordant. You look around the room you are in right now. The color of your walls, the dye in the clothes you're wearing, the glowing pixels on the screen you might be watching this on, each one is an echo. An echo of a hand pressing red ochre to a cave wall. An echo of a craftsman firing sand and copper into a blue stone. An echo of a dyer pulling a dripping, magical thread from a stinking vat. The ancient world built the foundations of our palette, one dangerous, difficult, and precious color at a time. And their enduring legacy is the beautiful, vibrant, and effortlessly colorful world you get to live in. And so, our long journey through the ancient world of color comes to a gentle close. The roaring furnaces are now banked, their fiery glows softening into embers. The busy workshops have fallen silent, with only the scent of beeswax and linseed oil lingering in the still air. The memory of those vibrant, chaotic marketplaces, filled with bolts of crimson and indigo cloth, begins to recede, leaving behind a peaceful quiet. You can let go of the details now. Let the names of the minerals and the plants and the strange chemical processes drift away like milkweed fluff on a warm breeze. The story is told. The journey from that first red handprint on a sun-drenched rock, all the way to the complex, shimmering palette of empires, is complete. All that effort, all that striving, all that ancient, human drive to capture a piece of the rainbow, has found its rest. Feel the quiet settle around you now, the way dust settles on an old stone floor in a forgotten temple. The colors of your own room are softening in the dim light, their edges blurring, their daytime boldness giving way to a soft, sleepy haze. The darkness behind your eyelids is no longer the deep, fearful dark of a prehistoric cave, but a safe and comforting blanket. There is nothing left to learn, nothing left to see. There is only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, a soft and steady beat in the immense, peaceful silence. Let the quiet hold you. Let the darkness be a soft cushion. Sleep now,